People don't betray you by accident. They betray you because they believe you're too weak to stop them. Welcome to 3 Hours of Manipulation Tactics by Machiavelli. Not the watered-down version taught in classrooms, but the raw, ruthless insights that have shaped empires and outwitted enemies for centuries. In this audio experience, you'll uncover the dark strategies of power, loyalty, and control, the kind of knowledge people wish they had before they were lied to, stepped on, or quietly replaced. This isn't for the faint-hearted. It's for those who've learned the hard way that being too nice is a liability, and that in life you're either playing the game or getting played. If this is your first time on our channel, hit subscribe and let us know in the comments which philosopher you'd like us to decode next. People only respect strength. Kindness without power invites betrayal. This idea, brutal in its honesty, lies at the heart of Machiavellian thinking. Human nature, as Machiavelli observed, is not inherently noble. People are self-interested, driven by fear, desire, and survival. And in a world governed by these instincts, kindness without the ability to enforce consequences is not seen as virtue, it is seen as weakness. A leader who is kind but lacks the power to protect, punish, or command is not admired. They are taken advantage of. They are the lamb among wolves, praised for their softness while being quietly sized up for slaughter. Machiavelli warns us, if your kindness isn't backed by strength, you become a target, not a hero. Consider a workplace scenario. A manager who always says yes, avoids conflict, and tries to please everyone without ever setting boundaries or making hard decisions might be liked at first, but slowly their team begins to ignore their authority. Deadlines are missed, standards slip, gossip spreads. Why? Because respect was never established. Kindness became a mask for fear of confrontation, and the moment that's sensed, control is lost. Respect evaporates. Now contrast that with a leader who is firm, decisive, and holds people accountable. They may not be liked immediately, they may even be feared, but they are respected. And once that respect is rooted, any kindness they show is valued more deeply, because it's rare, because it's intentional, and because it comes from a place of real power. Machiavelli would say, "It is better to be feared than loved, if you cannot be both." But being feared doesn't mean being cruel. It means being immovable in your principles, clear in your expectations, and willing to act when those lines are crossed. Kindness from such a person is not weakness. It is strategy. It binds loyalty, rewards excellence, and shows that the strong can afford to be generous. But when kindness is your only weapon, betrayal becomes inevitable. People start testing your limits. They make demands, then more demands. They lie. They take. And the moment you try to say enough, you realize your earlier kindness has no weight. You never set the tone. You never created the fear that makes people think twice before crossing you. In personal relationships, too, this principle holds. People respect partners who know their worth, set boundaries, and aren't afraid to walk away. The more you tolerate disrespect in the name of being nice, the more you erode your own value. The more chances you give without consequence, the more predictable your forgiveness becomes. And what is predictable becomes exploitable. Machiavelli teaches us that power doesn't corrupt, it reveals. It reveals who understands the rules of human behavior and who is still pretending that the world rewards goodness for its own sake. It doesn't. The world rewards strength first. Once that foundation is secure, kindness can become a powerful second language. But reverse the order, and you'll find that kindness without strength is just an invitation for betrayal, manipulation, and eventual ruin. A ruler is either feared or ignored. There is no safe middle. This is one of the coldest truths Machiavelli offers, and one that most leaders, whether in politics, business, or family, learn only after losing control. Power is not sustained by goodwill alone. It is maintained by presence, by dominance, by the psychological grip you hold over those who follow you. If people do not fear the consequences of defying you, they will eventually stop listening altogether. Fear in this context is not about cruelty. It's about certainty. It's about knowing that if lines are crossed, action will follow. That rebellion, insubordination, or disobedience will meet a response so firm that no one will dare try it again. A ruler who is feared doesn't have to constantly shout, threaten, or punish. The fear is built into the position, into the reputation. It's in the silence before a command is given. It's in the weight of your expectations. But when fear is absent, when a leader tries to remain inoffensive, overly likable, or soft-handed, they create a vacuum. In that vacuum, people test limits. They gossip behind your back. They challenge your decisions. They take liberties, not because they are inherently evil, but because authority is like gravity. When it weakens, everything starts to drift. To be ignored is not neutral. It is fatal. It is the slow death of relevance, of leadership, of control. Machiavelli understood this perfectly. He saw that those who try to walk the middle path, being neither feared nor forceful, end up forgotten, disrespected, or overthrown. Power demands presence. If your presence doesn't inspire caution, it will inspire indifference. There's a reason ancient rulers built towering monuments and wore extravagant crowns, not just to display wealth, but to instill awe. Today's equivalent might be less theatrical, but the principle stands. You must command a presence that says, "I am not to be trifled with." Without that, your role as a leader becomes symbolic at best and invisible at worst. This doesn't mean you must rule with terror or brutality. It means you must be unshakable. It means when you say no, it means no. It means your silence makes people nervous. It means your praise is rare and therefore priceless. It means your disappointment cuts deeper than raised voices ever could. People are always watching, even when they pretend not to be. They take notes on how you react under pressure, how you handle disrespect, how you respond to being challenged. Every time you let something slide that should have been checked, you lower your own position. Every time you tolerate disrespect, you train people to ignore you. Fear, when rightly used, doesn't create hatred. It creates structure. It builds an invisible framework of boundaries that protect both the ruler and the ruled. It eliminates uncertainty. And in a world where power is always being tested, certainty is more respected than friendliness. So ask yourself, do people follow because they have to, or because they can get away with not following at all? If the answer is the latter, you are not leading. You are simply being tolerated until the day someone stronger comes to take your place. Loyalty is for sale. Never expect it to last longer than your usefulness. This is a bitter truth that unravels the illusions most people have about loyalty, especially those in positions of leadership. Machiavelli didn't see loyalty as a moral commitment. He saw it as a transaction, a temporary alignment of interests, and once your value diminishes, so too does the devotion others pretend to offer. In politics, business, and even family, loyalty is rarely unconditional. People may smile, nod, swear allegiance, even take oaths. But what they're really loyal to is what you provide. That might be protection, status, opportunity, or influence. The moment you can no longer supply those benefits, or worse, when someone else can offer more, they will shift their allegiance, not out of malice, out of survival. Consider the rise and fall of powerful CEOs, generals, or politicians. When they're at the top, everyone wants to be seen beside them. Their words are echoed, their presence celebrated. But once their power fades, scandal, sickness, loss of control, the crowd thins. Allies vanish, advisors defect. The same people who toasted their brilliance will now discuss their mistakes. This isn't betrayal in the eyes of the world. It's strategy. The herd moves toward the new source of power. The leader, now obsolete, is left wondering what happened to all the loyalty they were promised. Machiavelli would say, nothing happened to it. It simply expired. Understanding this gives you an edge. It allows you to stop expecting people to stay loyal for sentimental reasons. Instead, you learn to maintain leverage. Keep offering value. Stay relevant. Make yourself dangerous to betray. When people know you still hold cards, information, influence, resources, they think twice before walking away. And when you do receive loyalty that goes beyond self-interest, rare but real, you recognize it not as your right, but as a gift. Even then, wise rulers test it. They don't assume. They observe. Because the most dangerous kind of betrayal comes from those you thought would never turn. This principle also flips inward. You too are loyal to those who serve your goals. How many mentors, leaders, or employers have you outgrown? Were you truly loyal to them or to the version of yourself that needed them at the time? Once they stopped being useful, your attention moved elsewhere. We're all playing the same game. That's why smart leaders reward loyalty when it's real, but they never rely on it blindly. They keep incentives alive. They make themselves indispensable, or at least intimidating to cross. Machiavelli didn't preach paranoia. He preached awareness. The battlefield of power is littered with the corpses of those who confused flattery for allegiance and promises for permanence. So cultivate loyalty, yes, but never depend on it. Invest in systems, not sentiment. Build relationships that are mutually beneficial and know when they've run their course. And always remember, in the world of power, people aren't loyal to you. They're loyal to what you represent. When that representation fades, so will they. Morality is a tool used by the weak to control the strong. This statement turns conventional wisdom on its head. We're often taught that morality is a universal compass, a standard that elevates humanity. But Machiavelli saw it differently. He saw morality not as a fixed truth, but as a strategy, a tool wielded most effectively by those without the power to dominate through force or wealth. When people lack power, they don't surrender, they adapt. And one of the oldest strategies of the powerless is to redefine the battlefield. If they can't beat you with strength, they'll try to beat you with guilt. They'll call your ambition greed. They'll label your decisiveness as cruelty. They'll take your willingness to act and frame it as corruption. Why? Because if they can't stop you physically, they'll try to stop you morally. This isn't just theory, it's history. Throughout time, moral systems have often been developed by those who stood to lose from brute power. The early Christian church, for instance, rose in a brutal Roman Empire that celebrated conquest and strength. So what did the church promote? Humility, meekness, turning the other cheek. Not because it was objectively better, but because it gave the weak a way to claim superiority. If you couldn't win in the real world, you'd win in the spiritual one and shame your oppressors into restraint. Machiavelli wasn't anti-morality. He was anti-delusion. He believed morality should serve power, not restrain it. A ruler must understand the moral language of his people, yes, but not be imprisoned by it. If lying preserves the state, lie. If cruelty prevents chaos, be cruel. If breaking a promise keeps the peace, break it. The survival and strength of the nation, or the business, the family, the legacy, outweigh the approval of those too weak to act. In the modern world, morality still functions as a leash. Public opinion shames leaders into inaction. Social codes demand apologies for strength. And meanwhile, those who enforce these codes, the so-called guardians of morality, often have the least to lose and the most to gain by keeping others restrained. They want the strong to feel guilty for being strong. They want the ambitious to slow down, to self-sabotage, to question themselves. Because if the strong hesitate, the weak have a chance. This philosophy also explains why moral outrage is selective. People don't always care about right or wrong. They care about who's winning. If a powerful figure makes a misstep, morality becomes a weapon. But when someone weak does the same thing, they're forgiven, excused, even defended. It's not about ethics. It's about leverage. The wise understand that morality is a performance. It has value, but only when it serves your aims. Display it when it earns you trust. Discard it when it becomes a chain. If you rule through raw power alone, you'll breed rebellion. But if you master the appearance of morality while remaining unbound by it, you hold all the cards. Because then you're not just feared, you're believed. And belief, when shaped properly, is more powerful than any army. Deception is not evil. It is strategy, and this idea unsettles people because it strips away the comforting illusion that truth and honesty always win. But Machiavelli saw the world not as we wish it to be, but as it is, a battlefield of ambition where survival often depends not on brute force, but on cunning. In that battlefield, deception is not a vice. It is a weapon, used to gain time, mislead rivals, and control outcomes that brute strength cannot. Deception, in its purest form, is about control over perception. And perception, in a world shaped by human judgment, is often more powerful than reality. A ruler who is wise understands this. He does not tell the truth simply because it's true. He tells the truth only when it serves his purpose. Otherwise, he misleads, withholds, or manipulates the narrative, because the goal is not transparency. The goal is advantage. History is full of leaders who mastered this principle. Kings signed peace treaties they never intended to honor. Generals feigned retreat to lure enemies into traps. Corporations launched narratives to protect their brand while hiding inner rot. These actions are not necessarily evil. They are strategic. And those who fail to use deception, who insist on radical honesty in a dishonest world, often end up as martyrs, not leaders. People say they value honesty, but what they truly value is consistency with their expectations. If the truth threatens those expectations, they reject it. And so those who speak the raw truth are punished. Those who shape truth to match people's desires are rewarded. That's not justice, it's psychology. And Machiavelli understood human psychology better than most. He also understood that deception allows for flexibility. A leader who binds himself to always telling the truth becomes predictable, and predictability is a weakness. Your enemies know what you'll do. Your rivals see your playbook. But a leader who deceives, he becomes unreadable. His moves are hidden. His motives obscured. He can pivot without warning. That unpredictability creates fear, and fear, properly managed, creates obedience. Even in personal life, the concept holds weight. Deception doesn't always mean malicious lying. It can mean strategic silence, the careful management of image, the art of appearing more confident than you feel. These forms of self-deception aren't immoral. They're necessary. You dress a certain way for a job interview not to lie, but to influence perception. You phrase your requests to get what you want. You withhold details to protect leverage. This is not dishonesty for cruelty's sake. It's a strategy for survival. Machiavelli wasn't saying you should deceive constantly. He was saying you must know when to deceive. Because if you refuse to play the game, you will be played by those who do. And those who treat every situation with honesty, expecting fairness in return, are often blindsided by those who smile while hiding a knife. The world doesn't punish deception. It punishes getting caught. And those who master the art of calculated deceit often rise to the top, not in spite of it, but because of it. Fear maintains order better than love. Machiavelli saw leadership not through the lens of ideals, but through the lens of results. He knew that the dream of being both loved and obeyed was appealing, but rare, and when forced to choose between the two, fear was the safer bet. Why? Because love is voluntary. Fear is enforceable. Love can fade, shift, or be manipulated by others. But fear, when carefully cultivated, remains a constant force that keeps people in line. A leader who relies solely on love must constantly appease. They hesitate to make tough decisions, fearing the loss of affection. They become vulnerable to manipulation, blackmail, or emotional leverage. People take advantage of their need to be liked, and the moment they must act decisively, perhaps even ruthlessly, they find that those who once loved them are unwilling to follow when the path gets dark. Fear, however, creates a different kind of loyalty, not warm or sentimental, but durable. It's rooted in the understanding that defiance comes with consequences. And in a world where self-interest rules, people are far more likely to obey when disobedience threatens their comfort, their status, or their survival. Machiavelli wasn't advocating cruelty for its own sake. He was advocating fear as a tool of stability. Properly managed, it prevents chaos. Consider how fear functions in society. Why do most people follow laws? Not because they love the lawmakers, not because they believe in every rule, but because they fear punishment, fines, jail time, public shame. This fear maintains order far more effectively than appeals to virtue or community spirit. In moments of crisis, it's not love that keeps crowds from turning violent. It's the presence of force. Now apply this to leadership. A ruler who is feared is not necessarily hated. That's a critical distinction. If fear becomes hatred, rebellion brews. But if fear is combined with justice, if people believe the ruler is fair but not to be crossed, then fear becomes stabilizing. It discourages betrayal, reinforces authority, and reduces the need for constant negotiation. People respect what they fear. A leader who has shown the capacity for decisive, even brutal action earns a kind of psychological weight. Their silence carries tension. Their gaze commands attention. And their rules are followed, not because they are beloved, but because the cost of breaking them is known and remembered. Love invites closeness, but that closeness can blur boundaries. When a leader is too loved, followers begin to treat them like equals. They demand favors, they expect leniency, and they challenge authority. What begins as admiration often turns into entitlement. And when the leader can no longer fulfill every desire, that love turns to resentment. Fear avoids this trap. It creates clear lines. It demands discipline. And it ensures that the leader remains above, not as a tyrant, but as a figure whose authority is not up for debate. So Machiavelli's point isn't that love has no value. It's that love alone cannot govern. Love may inspire devotion, but fear maintains control. And in a world where order is fragile and loyalty is fickle, fear is the foundation that keeps everything standing. If you must lie, lie boldly and never apologize. This principle cuts directly against the grain of conventional morality, but for Machiavelli, politics and leadership were never about moral purity. They were about effectiveness, survival, and control. And in that brutal arena, timidity is more dangerous than dishonesty. If you're going to lie, do it with conviction. Hesitation invites suspicion. Regret invites attack. But boldness? Boldness confuses people. It creates momentum. It turns fiction into a kind of truth through sheer force of belief. A weak lie is worse than no lie at all. When you lie timidly, when your voice wavers, your eyes dart, your words are padded with apology, you don't just lose trust, you lose respect. People see through it. They sense guilt, and guilt is the scent of weakness. In contrast, a bold lie, delivered without flinching, without remorse, without the slightest crack in your tone, seizes control of the narrative. It tells people, you're not asking to be believed. You're telling them what reality now is. This kind of lying isn't about random deception. It's strategic. It's used when the truth would cost you control, when transparency would make you vulnerable, or when the illusion is more useful than the fact. Leaders throughout history have used this tactic to rally armies, win elections, protect alliances, or buy time. A strong lie can hold an empire together. A weak truth can tear it apart. Take the battlefield, for instance. Imagine a general whose forces are outnumbered. Panic is spreading. The truth would destroy morale. So he lies. Reinforcements are coming. Victory is near. The enemy is weak. And he doesn't whisper it. He shouts it from the front lines. His confidence spreads like wildfire, not because the facts changed, but because belief changed. Soldiers fight harder when they think they're winning. And sometimes that belief turns the tide. The lie becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. Now consider the apology. Why is Machiavelli so firm in saying never to apologize for a lie? Because an apology hands power to your enemies. It signals guilt, and guilt invites scrutiny. People dig deeper. They question everything you've ever said. Your authority cracks. In politics and power, perception is everything. Apologizing tells the world you've lost control of yours. Bold liars don't ask for forgiveness because they never admit the lie. Or, if cornered, they reframe the lie as necessity, as brilliance, as strategy. They double down. And in many cases, the public admires the audacity more than the deception. People are drawn to confidence. They trust certainty, even when it's manufactured. The lie, repeated often enough and with enough conviction, can outlive the truth. But there's a risk, and Machiavelli knew this. The lie must serve a greater aim. If it's reckless, selfish, or sloppy, it will eventually collapse. But when it's precise, calculated, and bold, it becomes a lever of influence. Those who master this skill can bend perception, rewrite narratives, and outmaneuver opponents who still believe honesty is always a virtue. So when the moment calls for deception, don't whisper, don't shrink, lie like it's truth, and never look back. Do not reveal your intentions unless revealing them serves your power. This is one of the most practical and dangerous truths in the Machiavellian playbook. In any contest of power, whether political, personal, or professional, transparency is rarely a virtue. It is a vulnerability. When people know exactly what you want, what you plan, and what you fear, they gain leverage over you. They can block your moves, undercut your plans, and use your ambitions against you. But when you mask your true intentions, you remain unpredictable. And unpredictability is power. Most people are too eager to explain themselves. They want to be understood, validated, or praised. They mistake openness for trust building. But in truth, the more people understand your goals, the easier you are to manipulate. Even friends, even allies, will begin to position themselves in ways that serve their interests, not yours. A plan revealed is a plan exposed. A dream shared too early becomes fragile, shaped by others' doubts, envy, or resistance. Machiavelli understood that concealment is not cowardice. It is strategy. A wise leader moves in silence. He lets people assume, guess, or even underestimate him. He floats conflicting messages, encourages misdirection, and gives no one the full picture, not even his closest circle. Why? Because once people believe they understand your path, they begin to anticipate your steps. They interfere. They mirror your strengths. But when your direction is obscured, no one can prepare a counterattack. They're always reacting, always off balance. Deception, in this case, isn't about lying. It's about withholding. It's about letting people see only what you want them to see. You smile during negotiations to appear soft. You feign disinterest to lower resistance. You express vague intentions to buy time. All of it is part of the game. Information is power, and the fewer people who have it, the more control you maintain. Even when you do reveal your intentions, it must be tactical. It should serve a clear purpose: to mislead enemies, to inspire followers, or to test loyalty. A false intention, boldly declared, can flush out threats. A partial truth, cleverly delivered, can distract rivals from your real objectives. In war, the best generals never announce their targets. They let the enemy believe one thing while preparing another. In life, the principle is no different. Silence is not weakness, it is pressure. It forces others to talk more, guess more, and overreach. The more someone tries to figure you out, the more they reveal about themselves. Their questions expose their fears. Their assumptions betray their goals. And all the while, you remain in control, not because you said more, but because you said less. The greatest victories are often won before the first move is made, through anticipation, through patience, through invisibility. So guard your intentions as you would a crown. Do not speak your next step unless it tightens your grip. Do not share your vision unless it weakens your opposition. Let mystery be your armor, and let action, not words, announce your power. A good reputation is armor, but lies can build it faster than truth. Reputation is one of the most powerful assets in any leader's arsenal. It precedes you, protects you, and amplifies your influence without you having to lift a finger. People follow those with strong reputations, often without verifying if that reputation is earned. And therein lies the dark opportunity. If perception is what moves people, then shaping that perception is more important than living up to it. Building a reputation through actions, through honest work, discipline, sacrifice, takes time. It is slow, vulnerable to setbacks, and dependent on the recognition of others. You can do everything right for years and still be ignored. But a well-crafted lie, strategic, bold, and consistent, can build a legend overnight. It doesn't have to be real. It just has to be believable. Machiavelli understood this long before modern public relations or branding experts ever existed. The truth is optional, but image is everything. When people believe you're competent, powerful, or principled, they treat you as if you are. They defer, they trust, they hesitate to challenge you. Reputation creates a psychological force field. It saves you from having to prove yourself in every room. And once it's in place, it starts to do the work for you, silencing critics, rallying support, deterring enemies. But here's the deeper Machiavellian insight. People rarely examine reputations closely. They inherit opinions. They follow whispers. They latch onto symbols, titles, appearances, endorsements. And if you know how to control these symbols, you can construct a reputation that outpaces reality. Say the right things, associate with admired figures, stage selective victories, leak stories that flatter your image. In time, the illusion hardens into belief, and belief, as Machiavelli reminds us, is more powerful than fact. Even when the truth begins to surface, people resist it. Why? Because reputations create emotional investments. Once someone believes in you, they don't want to be wrong. They dismiss inconvenient truths as exceptions. They reinterpret your actions to fit the image they've already accepted. And the bolder the lie was from the start, the harder it becomes to challenge. Doubt gets buried under the weight of consistency and confidence. Of course, lies carry risk. If exposed recklessly or too early, they backfire. But Machiavelli wouldn't advise lying for the sake of deceit. He'd advise lying when it strategically enhances your position. A reputation built on bold deception must be maintained with discipline. You cannot hesitate. You cannot contradict yourself. You must become the role you've invented, until the world forgets it was ever fiction. Meanwhile, those who cling to the slow path of truth often find themselves overtaken. Their quiet competence is overshadowed by louder, more impressive illusions. Their integrity is admirable, but powerless against the flood of perception. So understand this: your reputation is your shield, and it will be tested. Build it carefully, but don't fear fabrication. In a world where appearances win more battles than facts, a lie told with skill and consistency can protect you better than the truth ever will. The masses crave illusion more than reality. Feed it to them. Machiavelli knew that human beings as a collective are not driven by logic or truth, but by emotion, perception, and belief. The average person does not want to face the raw, uncomfortable mechanics of power, economics, or ambition. They want comfort. They want stories. They want meaning neatly packaged, even if it's false. And those who understand this rule, who learn to feed illusions while quietly managing reality, become the true architects of power. Reality is messy. It requires effort to understand. It often delivers uncomfortable truths, shades of gray, and hard decisions. Most people don't want that. They want heroes and villains, certainty and simplicity. They want to believe that someone is in control, that justice always wins, that their leaders are noble, and that success is deserved. These beliefs are illusions, but they are powerful because they soothe anxiety and make life feel manageable. A ruler who offers truth without illusion becomes hated. People will resent being shown how the world really works, especially if it contradicts the stories they've built their identity around. But a leader who cloaks harsh truths behind beautiful words, who offers symbolic gestures instead of genuine change, who entertains, flatters, and distracts, such a leader will be adored. Not because they do more good, but because they make people feel better. This is why propaganda works. This is why branding matters more than substance. Why a public apology can restore reputation more effectively than private accountability. It's why crowds cheer for politicians who say the right slogans even if their policies are empty. The masses want the emotional high that illusion provides. They want to believe, and belief is more potent than fact. Machiavelli would not condemn the people for this. He would simply advise leaders to use it. Give them spectacles. Give them rituals. Give them narratives that position you as protector, liberator, or savior, even if behind the curtain you're making cold, calculated decisions. Give them symbols to worship. Let them see just enough virtue to trust you, just enough drama to stay entertained, just enough danger to keep them needing you. When the crowd is watching one hand, act with the other. This is how empires are built and maintained, not by truth-telling, but by stagecraft. Even when people discover fragments of the truth, most will ignore it if the illusion remains more comforting. The truth requires action, and action is hard, but illusion lets people sleep. Consider the entertainers who become political icons, the CEOs who are celebrated more for charisma than results, the influencers who craft entire identities from selective storytelling. The masses elevate these figures not because they're real, but because they play the part convincingly. That's what the crowd craves, not authenticity, but believability. So feed the illusion, shape the narrative, control what people see and hear. Let the truth serve your goals, not sabotage them. And remember, Those who master illusion shape the world, while those who cling to truth are often left explaining it to a crowd that no longer cares. The appearance of virtue is more powerful than virtue itself. In the world of influence and authority, perception is often more important than reality. Machiavelli understood that while true virtue is admirable, it is rarely seen, rarely understood, and rarely rewarded. What people respond to, what moves them, what earns their trust, their votes, their obedience, is not the inner quality of a leader's heart, but the outward performance of integrity, compassion, and strength. The appearance of virtue commands loyalty, silences critics, and builds reputations faster than actual moral behavior ever could. A truly virtuous person may suffer in silence, act with humility, and avoid the spotlight. But in doing so, they often go unnoticed. Their good works may be buried under louder, more flamboyant displays of half-truths and performance. Meanwhile, a clever leader who understands the power of optics can simulate virtue, don the costume of integrity, without having to live it. He knows that people don't investigate. They interpret. They fill in the blanks based on what they see, not what truly is. This principle holds enormous power. A ruler who appears just, merciful, and honorable will be trusted, even if his private actions are ruthless and strategic. He can execute harsh policies behind closed doors while standing before the people as a man of peace. He can manipulate allies, betray rivals, and crush dissent, all while being praised for his fairness and wisdom. Why? Because he mastered the art of presentation. Real virtue requires sacrifice. It often demands silence, self-restraint, and difficult choices. But the appearance of virtue requires only stagecraft, a well-timed gesture of generosity, a tear at the right moment, a speech that appeals to morality and hope. These performances are easy to engineer, and they're enough to earn the admiration of the masses. People want to believe in their leaders, and they will cling to appearances that comfort them, even if the truth lies in the opposite direction. This doesn't mean virtue has no value. It means virtue must be paired with the awareness of how it's perceived. A wise leader does not rely on his internal morality to win respect. He crafts a public image that reflects virtue even when strategy demands otherwise. He knows when to show humility, when to pretend outrage, when to deliver symbolic punishments or rewards. These moves maintain the illusion, and the illusion maintains power. The danger lies in being truly good without being seen as good. A leader who acts morally but fails to communicate that morality can be destroyed by appearances. The public may turn on him, enemies may exploit his silence, and allies may doubt his strength. Machiavelli warns us, it is not enough to be righteous. You must look righteous. Otherwise, the world will believe the opposite. So learn to wear virtue like a cloak. Let it shield your actions, even when your actions serve darker ends. Use it to gain trust, to silence suspicion, to create loyalty. Let others believe in your goodness. Let them defend it, spread it, build myths around it. Because once they do, you become untouchable, not because of who you are, but because of who they think you are. You don't need to be good, only to appear good. In the game of power, being truly good is optional. What matters is that others believe you are. Machiavelli understood that the world is not governed by moral absolutes, but by perception. The masses judge not by truth, but by what they see, what they hear, and what comforts them. And so the clever leader learns that moral reality is less important than moral performance. To appear good means controlling your image, your tone, your symbols, and your timing. It means knowing when to show compassion, when to deliver a public act of justice, and when to express concern or outrage, whether or not you actually feel those things. People don't want a leader who is good in private. They want a leader who looks good in public. Appearances are easier to digest than complexity. A carefully staged photo, a carefully worded speech, a single tear at the right moment. These gestures carry more weight than a lifetime of quiet integrity. True goodness is slow, subtle, and often invisible. It involves self-sacrifice, discipline, and doing what is right even when no one is watching. But most people aren't watching, and those who are often lack the time or desire to dig deep. They want signals. They want confirmation of what they already believe. So if you offer the illusion of goodness with enough confidence and consistency, people will not only accept it, they will defend it for you. Meanwhile, leaders who are genuinely good but fail to manage their image often find themselves misunderstood, mistrusted, or forgotten. The world punishes those who let others define the narrative. A man may be honest, fair, and compassionate, but if he does not signal those traits outwardly, if he is too private, too quiet, too resistant to self-promotion, he will be overtaken by someone less virtuous but more skilled at shaping appearances. This is why Machiavelli taught rulers to maintain the facade of virtue while retaining the freedom to act immorally when necessary. You can lie, cheat, or deceive so long as you appear honorable. You can betray an ally so long as you frame it as a painful but necessary decision. You can manipulate, punish, or dominate so long as it looks like leadership. The illusion of goodness is a shield, and if people believe in your virtue, they will overlook or justify your darker actions. People want to trust. They want to believe their leaders are decent, so they become complicit in the illusion. They rationalize. They excuse. They ignore what doesn't fit the image. And in that space of selective perception, power thrives. A ruler who understands this doesn't need to carry the burden of being truly good. He needs only to master the tools of theater, image, timing, tone, and symbolism. So don't waste energy trying to be perfect. Be strategic. Build the image. Control the perception. Because in the end, it's not your virtue that protects you. It's your reputation. And your reputation doesn't depend on who you are. It depends entirely on who people think you are. Betray before you are betrayed. In a world driven by power, self-interest, and ambition, betrayal is not a question of if, but when. Machiavelli understood this. He didn't romanticize loyalty or assume that relationships, whether political alliances, business partnerships, or friendships, were built on trust. He knew that trust is temporary, fragile, and ultimately expendable. What endures is advantage. And the moment someone sees an opportunity to serve their own interests at your expense, they will take it, unless, of course, you strike first. To betray before you are betrayed is not about paranoia. It's about understanding human nature. When people begin to drift from your influence, when their tone shifts, when their ambitions grow beyond what you can offer them, their loyalty weakens. You may still believe the bond is strong. You may still cling to the illusion of mutual respect. But beneath the surface, calculations are already being made. They're weighing their options, preparing their moves, building their alibis. If you wait until the betrayal is obvious, it's already too late. Machiavellian wisdom demands foresight. If someone close to you holds enough power to harm you, and the balance of power begins to shift in their favor, you must act. Waiting out of sentimentality is weakness. Sentimentality in politics, in leadership, in any position of authority is a luxury, and luxuries get people killed. History is filled with examples. Advisors who turned into rivals, allies who became enemies, protégés who eventually eclipsed their mentors. What they all have in common is that the warning signs were there. Subtle changes in language, new alliances, concealed ambitions. But the leader, clinging to loyalty, failed to act. The knife was only visible after it had already entered the back. To betray before you are betrayed is to control the timeline. It means you write the story, you choose the moment, and you define the narrative. The one who acts first is rarely seen as the traitor. More often, they are remembered as decisive. They protect the structure, they preserve the vision, and they eliminate a threat before it metastasizes. This principle doesn't always mean open hostility. Sometimes betrayal is silent. You withhold information, you cut off access, you shift alliances quietly. You isolate a threat until their power is gone, but sometimes it must be public. You remove them from their position. You expose their flaws. You create a spectacle that reinforces your strength and sends a message to others. Betrayal will not be tolerated, but neither will hesitation. This philosophy is cold, but it's not cruel without purpose. It's about survival. If you lead, if you rise, if you command, you will attract envy, resentment, and ambition. Those closest to you are not immune. In fact, they're the ones most likely to betray you because they know you best. That knowledge makes them dangerous. So watch carefully. Read between the lines. And when the time comes, when you see the storm forming, don't wait for the lightning to strike. Move first. Betray before you are betrayed. And let that act secure your throne, your legacy, and your continued reign. The weak suffer not from cruelty, but from their inability to wield it. Cruelty, in the hands of the powerful, is not always evil. It is a tool, a form of control, a method of creating boundaries, enforcing discipline, and eliminating threats. Machiavelli understood that cruelty, when used strategically and decisively, can prevent chaos and preserve order. But when someone lacks the ability or the will to wield cruelty when necessary, they invite suffering not just upon themselves, but upon everyone they are meant to lead or protect. Weakness isn't defined by gentleness or compassion. It is defined by the refusal to take hard action when hard action is required. A ruler, a leader, or even an ordinary person navigating a ruthless world cannot afford the luxury of endless patience. There are moments when hesitation is fatal, when mercy enables further violence, when tolerance becomes complicity. And those who are too afraid to act decisively, those who fear being labeled cruel, end up trampled by those who don't hesitate. It's not cruelty that causes the downfall of the weak. It's their lack of command over it, their refusal to acknowledge its strategic value. They avoid making the hard decisions that strong leaders make early, eliminating enemies, confronting insubordination, setting examples. And because they delay, their problems multiply. What could have been solved with one sharp cut now requires a brutal war. What could have been discouraged with a single punishment now requires an entire campaign of control. In their effort to avoid being cruel, the weak often enable greater cruelty. There's a myth that good people must always be soft, that strength must always be wrapped in kindness. But Machiavelli challenges this. He knew that leadership, real leadership, means doing what others won't. And sometimes that means taking actions that others fear or refuse to understand, not for pleasure, not for vengeance, but because survival demands it. The paradox is clear. To truly protect, to truly lead, to truly rise, you must be capable of cruelty. Not ruled by it, but capable of it. You must be someone who chooses restraint, not because you are powerless, but because you are in control of immense power. That is what earns respect. That is what deters betrayal. That is what keeps chaos at bay. The weak, on the other hand, try to survive through appeasement. They give more chances, tolerate more disrespect, and hope that others will appreciate their goodness. But this only invites more predators. Because in the natural order, mercy without the threat of punishment is seen as weakness. And weakness is not pitied, it's preyed upon. So the path forward is not to abandon cruelty, but to master it. To understand when to use it sparingly, strategically, and without hesitation. Let it be sharp, quick, and final. Let it serve order. Let it preserve peace. The strong know this. The weak deny it, until they're swallowed by the very chaos they failed to prevent. In the end, it's not cruelty that destroys the weak. It's their naive belief that the world can be governed without it. Ethics are luxuries of those not in power. Power demands results, not ideals. Machiavelli saw ethics not as universal truths, but as tools that only the powerless treat as absolutes. When you lack power, clinging to ethics provides comfort, a sense of superiority, and sometimes a weapon against those above you. But once you gain power, ethics become situational. They must serve your goals, not obstruct them. The higher you rise, the more your survival and success depend on making decisions that others might call immoral, but which, from your position, are simply necessary. Those who are not in power can afford to moralize. They criticize from the sidelines, point fingers, and insist on purity because they are not responsible for outcomes. They don't bear the burden of protecting a nation, managing a corporation, or holding together a fragile alliance. They have the luxury of opinion, not the weight of consequence. But leaders, true leaders, live in the realm of action, not theory. They make choices that may violate conventional ethics because they understand the price of inaction is often greater than the price of moral discomfort. In politics, business, and war, tough decisions rarely align neatly with ethical standards. Do you sacrifice the few to save the many? Do you lie to prevent mass panic? Do you manipulate allies to outmaneuver a common enemy? These choices would horrify the idealist, but the realist knows they're unavoidable. Ethics, if followed blindly, can become a noose. They restrict flexibility. They slow decision-making. They allow your enemies, less bound by such ideals, to outmaneuver you. Consider how revolutions unfold. When those on the bottom rise, they often invoke ethics, justice, equality, freedom. But once they seize power, they face the same brutal decisions as their predecessors, and often they adopt the very tactics they once condemned. Why? Because power does not care about ideals. It demands effectiveness. Ethics are rewritten, bent, or discarded entirely to maintain control. This doesn't mean ethics have no place. It means they must be subordinate to purpose. A wise ruler knows when to honor them and when to set them aside. You show virtue when it wins trust. You act honorably when it reinforces your position. But when ethics begin to cost you power, influence, or stability, they must be paused. The key is to appear ethical while remaining strategically ruthless beneath the surface. The public doesn't see the hidden calculations. They see the performance. So long as you wear the mask of virtue, they will praise you, even if your decisions contradict their values. Most people don't want the truth. They want the reassurance that someone in power is doing the hard work of leading, even if they don't understand how that leadership works. So understand this. Ethics are a language, not a law. The powerful speak it fluently when needed, but never let it override the mission. Let others debate morality. You focus on results. Because in the game of power, only one rule endures: win. Everything else, including ethics, is optional. The ends always justify the means, especially when survival is at stake. This is one of Machiavelli's most famous and most feared principles, and it survives because it reflects a hard truth. When the stakes are high enough, especially when survival is on the line, moral debate becomes a distraction. In times of crisis, complexity collapses into necessity. You do what you must. You act decisively, sometimes brutally, not because you are evil, but because hesitation would be fatal. Survival rewrites the rules. A leader facing existential threats cannot afford the luxury of asking, "Is this right?" The only question that matters is, "Will this work?" Morality is ideal. Survival is real. The future belongs not to those who play clean, but to those who win. And history rarely remembers the ugliness behind victory, only that the victor survived and the loser didn't. When a ruler's kingdom is under siege, when a CEO is fighting a hostile takeover, when a political movement is one breath away from being extinguished, these are not the moments to prove moral superiority. They are the moments to act with precision and ruthlessness. If deception will save lives, then lie. If betrayal will ensure your rise, then betray. If force will prevent collapse, then use it. The goal is to protect the structure, to preserve the mission, to live another day. Once stability returns, once the dust settles, then the narrative can be rewritten, the actions reframed, the ethics repackaged. This is not an invitation to chaos. It's a demand for responsibility. The leader who fails to do what is necessary in the name of virtue will be replaced by someone who is willing. Because people will not tolerate noble failure forever. They need results. They need protection. And if virtue delivers neither, they will turn to strength regardless of the cost. The ends, when truly worthy, peace, survival, legacy, victory, carry enough weight to justify harsh methods. Of course, not all ends are equal, but when your existence, your sovereignty, or your legacy is under threat, you must prioritize effectiveness over appearances. Critics will call it immoral, but those same critics would not hesitate to benefit from your success once the danger has passed. The hypocrisy is common. People decry ruthless methods until those methods produce comfort or security. Then they forget how it was won. What they remember is who stood tall when others crumbled, who kept the system running when others folded, and who dared to do what others wouldn't. So when you act with clarity. If the means are necessary, don't flinch, don't explain, don't ask for permission. Deliver the result and let the world adjust. Let them debate your choices after you've already won. Because history is written by the survivors, not the saints. And in the crucible of real power, the ends don't just justify the means, they demand them. Silence is a weapon. Use it to control narratives. In a world obsessed with constant communication, silence has become one of the most underestimated tools of power. Yet Machiavelli understood that what is not said often speaks louder than what is. In politics, strategy, and influence, the wise do not rush to explain, defend, or confess. They withhold. They allow curiosity, anxiety, and speculation to work in their favor. Silence, when used deliberately, becomes a source of psychological pressure and narrative control. Most people fear silence because it creates uncertainty. When someone speaks, even in anger or criticism, they reveal their position. They give something away, but silence gives away nothing. It forces others to guess, to project, to fill the gap with their own fears or desires. This is where control begins, not by dominating the conversation, but by owning the space between words. A leader who speaks less is automatically perceived as more powerful. Their words are rarer, more weighted. When they finally do speak, people listen. Silence builds anticipation. It magnifies presence. It turns even a brief statement into something memorable. And while others scramble to explain or justify themselves, the silent leader stays composed, creating the impression of certainty and strength. In moments of conflict, silence can disarm. When accused, most people rush to deny, but silence suggests confidence, mystery, even indifference. It says, "I do not answer to you." It creates doubt in the accuser, tension in the audience, and leverage for the one who holds it. When you are silent, others must act without full information. They become reactive. You remain in control. Silence also protects strategy. Every time you speak, you risk revealing intention. Your tone, your phrasing, your timing, they all contain clues. But when you choose not to speak, your agenda remains hidden. You retain the element of surprise. You force your opponents to act on incomplete data, increasing the chance they will misstep. And in manipulation, silence is a pressure tactic. When someone expects an answer and you give none, they begin to second-guess themselves. They feel the need to explain more, to fill the awkward space, often revealing more than they should. Interrogators use silence to break people. Negotiators use it to gain better deals. Leaders use it to make people desperate for approval. Even in day-to-day influence, silence builds mystique. Oversharing is the habit of the weak. The powerful are selective. They let others talk, exposing their ambitions and weaknesses while they observe in silence. They learn. They adapt. They decide when and how to speak, knowing that each word is a strategic move, not a compulsive release. Silence is not passive. It is a calculated force. It creates space to think, room to maneuver, and fear in those who are addicted to noise. In a world that can't stop talking, the one who stays silent holds the power. Not because they have nothing to say, but because they understand that timing is everything, and silence, used well, is the sharpest cut of all. Keep your friends close, and your enemies unaware you're watching. This is not just a clever turn of phrase, it's a masterstroke of strategic positioning. Machiavelli knew that open hostility gives your enemies clarity. If they know you're watching them, if they sense your guard is up, they become cautious, they adjust, they prepare. But when they believe they've escaped your notice, when they think you're distracted, indifferent, or unaware, they reveal more. They get comfortable, and comfort makes them careless. To truly understand power, you must understand information. Control doesn't come from confrontation. It comes from surveillance, from studying others without alerting them, from being 10 steps ahead while pretending you're not even in the game. A visible enemy is defensive, but an oblivious one is exposed. So you don't just keep your friends close, you keep your enemies unaware. This philosophy is rooted in psychological warfare. The moment an enemy knows they're being watched, the dynamic shifts. They stop speaking freely. They start filtering their actions. They prepare for war. But if they think they're irrelevant to you, if they think you've forgotten or forgiven, they drop their guard. That's when they make mistakes. That's when they speak too openly, trust the wrong people, take risks they shouldn't. And that's when you strike, not out of emotion, but from informed advantage. Your friends, on the other hand, must be kept close, but not too close. Friendship, in the political sense, is a fluid concept. Friends can become enemies, and enemies can masquerade as friends. By keeping allies near, you not only ensure loyalty, but you monitor potential shifts in ambition. Familiarity is both a shield and a trap. You need to see their changing tone, their rising confidence, their hesitation when your name is mentioned. Those small shifts signal bigger moves to come. But with enemies, you take a different path. You avoid grand declarations. You don't confront. You don't threaten. You observe quietly. You embed yourself in the shadows of their strategy, not the spotlight. When they believe they're unopposed, they reveal their plans in full. They show their hand. And nothing is more dangerous to a strategist than a confident adversary who thinks no one is watching. This approach also gives you options. If you ever decide to confront them, you do so from a position of absolute knowledge. You don't guess. You know who they've spoken to, what they've planned, how far they're willing to go. And because they didn't know you were watching, they didn't prepare for your counterattack. Surprise in warfare and in politics is a force multiplier, and nothing creates better surprise than deliberate invisibility. Machiavelli didn't trust appearances. He didn't believe in surface-level allegiances. He believed in strategic silence, patient observation, and controlled reaction. If you walk around announcing who your enemies are, you give them the gift of awareness. But if you play the fool while quietly collecting every detail, you turn their confidence into your weapon. Keep your friends close. Watch them for signs of change. But your enemies? Let them live in illusion. Let them think the storm isn't coming. Then, when the time is right, you don't just defend yourself, you dismantle them from the inside out. Every alliance has an expiration date. Prepare for it. Machiavelli understood that alliances are not built on sentiment. They are built on interest. Two parties join forces because, at that moment, their goals align. That alignment may be political, strategic, financial, or even personal, but it is rarely permanent. Time, ambition, and changing circumstances erode that common ground. What begins as cooperation often ends in competition. And those who fail to prepare for the inevitable end of an alliance are often blindsided, betrayed, or replaced. The illusion that an alliance will last forever is one of the greatest strategic errors a leader can make. Alliances are useful, not sacred. They are agreements between self-interested actors. And once the value of that agreement shifts, once one party grows stronger or weaker or sees an advantage elsewhere, the bond begins to fray. A partner becomes distant. A friend grows silent. A supporter starts asking different questions. These are not coincidences. They are signs of expiration. The wise do not wait for betrayal to act. They anticipate it. They build contingency plans while the alliance is still strong. They collect leverage. They keep their own position independent, resilient, and unexposed. Because an alliance should be a tool, not a crutch. The moment you depend entirely on another's strength or loyalty, you place your fate in their hands. And when their interests shift, they will not hesitate to cut you loose. Look at history. Political alliances formed to defeat a common enemy often fracture once that enemy is gone. Wartime comrades become post-war rivals. Business partnerships dissolve once profits start tilting in one direction. Even personal relationships built on shared struggle weaken once the struggle ends and success creates new priorities. Unity is easy when there's a shared threat, but once comfort arrives, true intentions begin to surface. This is why Machiavellian strategy involves constant reevaluation. Every alliance must be monitored like a fading contract. Are they still benefiting from this arrangement? Am I? Is their ambition starting to outgrow their loyalty? Are they forming new relationships that I'm not part of? These aren't signs of paranoia, they're signs of intelligence. Because betrayal rarely comes without warning. It comes after ignored patterns, missed signals, and misplaced trust. Preparation doesn't mean sabotage. It means staying one step ahead. You maintain the alliance publicly, but internally you begin to reduce your exposure. You limit the information they have. You test their reliability in small ways. You make quiet moves to secure alternative partners. And if the day comes when the alliance dissolves, you are not caught off guard. You are already moving. Alliances are tools of convenience. Treat them with respect, but never worship them. Understand their value, but know they are temporary. Power is fluid. And those who cling to fixed relationships in a world of shifting dynamics will find themselves abandoned, often by the very hands they once trusted. So when you form an alliance, appreciate its value, but also set the clock. Watch it tick. And as the expiration date approaches, don't plead for its survival. Prepare for its replacement. Because nothing in power lasts forever, and those who act as if it does are always the first to fall. Mercy, when used too often, is a signal of insecurity. Mercy is powerful when rare, but when it becomes a habit, it starts to erode authority. Machiavelli understood this distinction clearly. True mercy is not weakness. It can be a calculated gesture that wins loyalty, diffuses tension, or creates a reputation for fairness. But when mercy is used too frequently or too easily, it ceases to be a virtue and becomes a liability. People begin to interpret it not as strength, but as fear. Fear of conflict, fear of being disliked, fear of taking decisive action. A leader who shows mercy in every situation trains people to believe that there are no consequences. Mercy, to be effective, must follow authority, not substitute for it. If you forgive every offense, spare every rival, and excuse every failure, you send a clear message. Your boundaries are flexible, your punishments are negotiable, and your authority is up for debate. People may admire your compassion, but they will not fear your power, and power without fear is power at risk. In leadership, mercy must be strategic, not emotional. It should be used to build loyalty from those who can still serve a purpose, to rehabilitate when the return is worth the risk, or to display strength by sparing someone you could easily destroy. But once it becomes your default response, once you start choosing mercy to avoid hard decisions, you begin to project insecurity. People don't follow leaders who seem unsure of their limits. They test them. Mercy without discipline breeds disorder. Subordinates stop performing at their best because failure carries no real cost. Enemies grow bolder because they know they will be spared. Allies lose respect because they see you hesitating where firmness is needed. And the public, whether in a kingdom, a company, or a movement, senses the shift. What once appeared as noble now feels unstable. History offers countless examples of rulers who fell because they were too merciful. They spared traitors who later overthrew them. They pardoned enemies who regrouped and returned with greater force. Their desire to be seen as benevolent cost them their throne. Meanwhile, those who exercised selective, deliberate mercy, tempered with firmness, retained their grip on power longer and more effectively. Mercy must never be a reaction to guilt or fear. It must be a choice made from a position of strength. When you choose to show mercy, it should be because it benefits your strategy, not because you fear the alternative. Mercy should always be earned, never expected. And those who receive it should walk away grateful, not empowered to defy you again. A reputation for fairness is valuable, but a reputation for mercy without limits invites collapse. The moment people believe you are too kind to punish, too hesitant to enforce, they stop taking you seriously. Your authority becomes symbolic. Your leadership, hollow. So reserve mercy for when it will make the biggest impact. Let it surprise people, not define you, because when mercy is wielded sparingly, it commands admiration. But when it is given too freely, it tells the world you are too insecure to lead. People forgive harshness faster than weakness. This truth lies at the core of power and influence. Harshness may bruise egos, provoke resistance, or draw criticism in the short term, but it is ultimately seen as strength. It signals certainty, authority, and the ability to act. Weakness, however, lingers. It breeds doubt, invites challenge, and undermines respect. People may complain about a harsh leader, but they will follow one. They may sympathize with a weak leader, but they will not trust them to lead. Machiavelli understood that harshness has boundaries, but weakness does not. Harshness can be explained, justified, even reframed as necessary discipline. It's associated with control, sometimes excessive, but control nonetheless. Weakness, on the other hand, is seen as the absence of control. It makes others nervous because in moments of crisis, weakness doesn't protect. It exposes. And people instinctively fear exposure more than discomfort. A harsh leader makes tough decisions. They enforce discipline, eliminate threats, and maintain order. Their actions may sting, but they create clarity. People know where the lines are. They may not love the leader, but they respect them. Over time, this respect often matures into loyalty, not out of affection, but out of recognition that the leader can be relied on when things fall apart. In contrast, a weak leader avoids confrontation. They hesitate to punish. They delay hard decisions. They apologize when firmness is needed. And over time, their attempts to be liked turn into permission for others to overstep. The structure begins to weaken. Morale suffers, not because the leader is unkind, but because they are unsteady. Insecurity at the top filters down. People begin to whisper, doubt spreads, and soon the same people who once praised the leader's softness begin to question their capacity to lead. People are drawn to strength, even when it's uncomfortable. In fact, discomfort often confirms for them that their leader is willing to do what they themselves cannot. They may grumble under strict rules or tough decisions, but they'll still align themselves with the one who commands. They want to feel protected, and harshness, when wielded with purpose, offers protection. Weakness offers only vulnerability. History repeatedly vindicates this idea. Leaders known for their ruthlessness are often respected long after their rule. Their names invoke fear, yes, but also order, legacy, decisiveness. Meanwhile, leaders remembered as overly forgiving, hesitant, or easily swayed are often forgotten, or worse, blamed for collapse. Their good intentions are overshadowed by the consequences of their inaction. Harshness, when justifiable, is a form of discipline. It's uncomfortable in the moment, but clarifying in the long run. Weakness, though dressed in compassion or humility, sends a message of insecurity. And insecurity at the top creates instability throughout the system. People may initially welcome a softer hand, but when danger appears, they'll look around and realize softness cannot hold the line. So, if you must choose the path that earns respect, not just affection. Because in the end, people will forgive a leader who was too harsh far faster than one who was too weak to lead. Men are driven by fear, ambition, and gain. Learn to manipulate all three. These are the levers that move human behavior, the hidden gears behind politics, business, war, and influence. Machiavelli understood that most people are not guided by lofty ideals or rational analysis. They respond to primal forces, fear of loss, hunger for advancement, and the pursuit of personal benefit. Anyone who wishes to lead, control, or outmaneuver others must master the art of pulling these levers at the right time, in the right order, with the right intensity. Fear is the most immediate motivator. It bypasses logic and hits the nervous system. Fear of punishment, fear of exclusion, fear of failure. These emotions create obedience faster than persuasion ever could. A leader who understands fear does not have to be cruel, only consistent. The mere belief that disobedience will lead to consequences is enough to enforce control. People may not like living under that shadow, but they will respect it. And when used strategically, fear creates boundaries that preserve order without constant enforcement. But fear alone is not sustainable. If overused, it creates resentment. That's where ambition comes in. People need something to strive for, a sense that they can rise, win, or expand their influence under your rule. Offer them ladders. Let them dream. Give them titles, access, and the illusion of upward mobility, even if the actual space at the top remains limited. When ambition is harnessed properly, people compete with each other instead of with you. They fight to climb within your system, not to overthrow it. Ambition is the most dangerous of the three motivators if left unmanaged. It can lead to betrayal, rebellion, or unchecked ego. But if you direct it, if you feed it just enough reward to keep people hungry, but not so much that they become independent, it becomes your most powerful engine. The ambitious man wants more than he has, and that desire makes him predictable. You don't need to crush him. You need to control the source of his advancement. The moment he sees that his dreams depend on you, he becomes manageable. Then comes gain, the most visible material driver. Money, status, access, security, these are the currencies of control. Gain is what most people openly chase, and thus it's the easiest to use. People will trade loyalty, time, and even values in exchange for personal gain. Promise it, delay it, increase it, or threaten to take it away, and you can steer behavior without lifting a weapon. The trick is never to give too much. Reward just enough to keep people invested, but never so much that they feel complete. Always leave something more just out of reach. The true strategist learns to combine these three forces. Use fear to keep people grounded, ambition to keep them moving, and gain to keep them obedient. Rotate them. Balance them. Adjust them as conditions change. Some situations require more fear. Others need more reward. Some people must be intimidated. Others must be seduced. But once you master these forces, you no longer beg for influence. You engineer stop. Because in the end, men are not as complicated as they pretend to be. Understand what drives them, and you understand how to control them. The greater your kindness, the easier your downfall. In leadership, kindness is often praised, even romanticized. But Machiavelli saw it for what it can become when left unchecked: a liability. Kindness in excess creates unrealistic expectations, fosters entitlement, and attracts opportunists. The more generous you are, the more people come to expect from you. And when you eventually say no, it's not seen as balance, it's seen as betrayal. The very kindness that once made you beloved becomes the rope others use to hang you. When you lead with kindness, people don't just appreciate your generosity, they start to depend on it. You create a pattern. They learn that they can ask, and you will give, that they can fail, and you will forgive, that they can push, and you will bend. And every time you accommodate them, they grow bolder, not because they are evil, but because human nature is self-serving. They will always test limits, and if you never draw the line, they assume there isn't one. The downfall begins when kindness is mistaken for weakness. A compassionate leader who avoids punishment, refuses confrontation, or constantly sacrifices their own interests for others soon becomes surrounded not by grateful followers, but by silent predators. These people may smile, flatter, and call you noble, but they're calculating. They know you're too kind to strike first, too kind to retaliate, too kind to protect your power. And the moment they see that, truly see it, you lose control. Even those who once respected you will turn. Because respect in power isn't built on how nice you are. It's built on how well you can protect yourself, enforce boundaries, and maintain order. If you can't do that, if your kindness prevents it, then you're no longer seen as a leader. You're seen as a figurehead, a symbol, a stepping stone. History remembers many who fell not because they were cruel, but because they were too good, too forgiving, too unwilling to disappoint. They gave too much and the wolves came. They trusted too blindly, and betrayal followed. Their legacies were torn down, not by their enemies, but by those who once claimed to love them. Kindness must be rare to be respected. It must be given from a position of strength, never as a default. When you are known to be strict, firm, and unyielding, a moment of kindness becomes powerful. It is seen as intentional, meaningful. But if kindness is your constant state, it loses all impact. It becomes expected, and what is expected is eventually taken for granted. Machiavellian wisdom teaches that leadership is not about being liked. It's about being effective. Be kind when it strengthens your influence, when it reinforces your command, when it rewards true loyalty. but never let kindness become a habit you can't control. Because once people learn that you'll always choose mercy, they'll begin to plan their mistakes in advance. They'll assume they can cross lines and still be forgiven. So be cautious. Every kind act shifts expectations. And the greater your kindness, the harder the backlash when it ends. Not because people are ungrateful, but because you trained them not to expect consequences. And when the consequences finally come, they won't see it as justice. They'll see it as cruelty from the very person who taught them to believe there would never be any. Success demands the sacrifice of innocence. Every rise to power, every climb toward greatness requires the shedding of illusions. The world does not reward purity, it rewards strategy. To succeed in any arena of life, politics, business, influence, leadership, you must let go of the naive belief that you can ascend without compromise. Innocence is a weight, a form of blindness, and those who cling to it are often the first to be manipulated, misled, or destroyed. Innocence believes that the world is fair, that good deeds are returned, that intentions matter more than results. But success is not built on intention. It is built on execution. It requires choices that are uncomfortable, sometimes ruthless. It demands an understanding that everyone has an agenda, that loyalty is conditional, and that trust, while useful, must be measured and rarely given without leverage. The innocent see the world through a moral lens. They believe playing fair will protect them. They believe virtue will be recognized and rewarded, but this view is not just false, it's dangerous, because it blinds them to the reality that others are not playing by the same rules. While they hesitate, others move. While they question, others act. And by the time the innocent realize they've been outmaneuvered, it's too late. The successful are not cruel for the sake of cruelty, but they understand that to build anything enduring, an empire, a company, a reputation, they must be willing to do what others won't. They must say no when it's unpopular. They must cut ties that no longer serve them. They must act with clarity, even when that clarity looks cold from the outside. This isn't a rejection of morality. It's a recognition that morality without strategy is powerless. To rise, you must learn to see the hidden motives in others, to question smiles, to read silence, to listen not just to what is said, but what is omitted. This awareness doesn't come naturally. It comes from shedding innocence, from learning the hard way that people will lie, flatter, and betray for gain. That deals are often broken, that allies become threats, and that loyalty evaporates the moment your power fades. Sacrificing innocence is not about becoming cynical. It's about becoming realistic. It's understanding that success is war disguised as civility, that behind every polite conversation may lie an agenda, that behind every alliance is a transaction. And once you see this, you're no longer easy to fool. You no longer depend on the goodness of others to protect you. You begin to protect yourself. Innocence says, this shouldn't happen. Success says, this is how it happens. What are you going to do about it? The transition from one to the other is painful, but necessary. It requires inner death, the death of idealism, of emotional fragility, of the fantasy that you can lead without ever making someone uncomfortable. Those who succeed are not the purest. They are the sharpest. They understand that the higher you climb, the more you must let go, not just of comfort or safety, but of innocence itself, because only those who see the world clearly can shape it. And clarity in the world of power is bought with the blood of your illusions. Never outshine your master until it's time to replace him. Power is not just about position, it's about perception. And in any hierarchy, the one who holds the throne is rarely the strongest, the smartest, or even the most effective. Often they are simply the most established, the one others have learned to serve, protect, or fear. To challenge that position openly before you're ready to take it is a fatal mistake. Machiavelli knew this well. When you make your superiors feel threatened, you trigger their most primitive instinct, self-preservation. Many rise quickly in the beginning because of talent, confidence, or results. But those same qualities can just as quickly become liabilities if they draw too much attention, especially if they start to eclipse the authority above them. Masters, bosses, and rulers all have egos, and egos are fragile. The moment they feel you are too ambitious, too popular, too capable, they begin to see you not as an asset, but as a threat. And once they label you a threat, the outcome is inevitable. You will be pushed aside, discredited, or destroyed, often under the pretense of protecting the organization, the vision, or the greater good. To survive and thrive under power, you must first master the art of strategic invisibility. Be valuable, but never indispensable. Shine just enough to be noticed, but never so brightly that you blind the one above you. Make your master feel safe. Let them believe their position is secure, even if, behind the scenes, you are building the very foundation to replace them. Praise their leadership, echo their ideas, help them win, but keep your own ambitions concealed beneath a mask of loyalty. This isn't deception for its own sake. It's protection. It's a long game. Because the time will come when your master grows weak, distracted, or vulnerable. Power is rarely given up voluntarily. It is lost through fatigue, mistake, or irrelevance. And when that moment arrives, the one who has been quietly preparing, not the one who challenged too early, will be ready to step in, seamlessly, without resistance, with the approval of others who now see you as the natural successor, not the rival. Timing is everything. If you try to replace your superior too soon, you'll be seen as insubordinate or treacherous. If you wait too long, someone else will take the spot. The key is to anticipate decline, to move subtly, and to ensure that by the time the master falls, you're already positioned as the only viable alternative. Not because you demanded it, but because you earned it, and because you never gave your master a reason to suspect it. This is the paradox of power. The more capable you are, the more dangerous you become to those above you. And the more dangerous you are, the more carefully you must play the game. Outshining the master may feel good in the moment, but true power doesn't seek recognition. It waits in the shadows until the crown is ready to fall. Then, and only then, do you step into the light, not as a challenger, but as the inevitable successor. Control perception, and you control people. Power does not begin with action. It begins with how people interpret action. Perception shapes reality far more than fact. What people believe you are capable of is more important than what you are actually doing. Control the narrative, the optics, the emotions attached to your image, and you control their behavior. Machiavelli understood that those who dominate perception hold a greater kind of power, one that doesn't require constant enforcement, only belief. People rarely dig beneath the surface. They respond to symbols, to appearances, to confidence. They are moved by what seems true, not what is true. That's why leaders carefully manage their image. Not just their words, but their presence, their silence, their expressions, their alliances. Everything is theater, and the most powerful actors are those who direct the show without ever appearing to do so. A leader who controls perception doesn't need to justify every decision. They simply create the impression that the decision is justified. They appear wise, even if their strategy is ruthless. They appear compassionate, even while eliminating threats. Because people don't question what feels consistent with their expectations. They want to trust what they see, and once they do, they stop looking deeper. Controlling perception means owning the story before others tell it for you. The public will always talk. Enemies will always try to twist your intentions. But if you get ahead of them, if you provide the version of events you want them to believe, you shape the lens through which they interpret everything else. Even your mistakes will be seen as noble struggles. Even your contradictions will be forgiven as complexity. That's the power of narrative. It also works in reverse. Destroy a person's reputation, and you destroy their influence, even if their actions haven't changed. Once the public perceives someone as weak, corrupt, or incompetent, their real capabilities become irrelevant. Their words fall on deaf ears. Their authority collapses. The actual truth doesn't need to matter. All that matters is what people believe to be true. This is why perception is more dangerous than force. Force can be resisted. It can be met with rebellion, retaliation, or endurance. But perception seeps into the mind. It shapes how people think, how they judge, how they choose. It makes them police themselves, doubt themselves, even betray themselves. Because the reality they've been shown feels more real than what they can verify. Leaders who understand this become masters of subtlety. They dress the part. They speak with precision. They plant rumors when necessary, praise publicly, and punish silently. They let others believe they have insight, while quietly guiding that belief in the direction they want. They never give away the full truth, only the version that serves their objective. Control perception, and you never have to explain. You don't fight for power, you draw it in effortlessly. Because when people see you as strong, they act as if you are. When they believe in your story, they help you live it. And when they follow the version of you that you've crafted, their loyalty is not to who you are, but to who they think you are. That's the real throne. Not the seat, but the story. Public opinion is a leash. Learn to hold it, not wear it. No ruler, leader, or public figure escapes the influence of public opinion. It is a force as real as armies or wealth, sometimes more powerful. But Machiavelli knew that the critical mistake is letting that force control you. Most people try to please the crowd, fearing its disapproval, adjusting themselves to its shifting moods. But those who lead by chasing public opinion become slaves to it. They wear it like a collar, letting their decisions be pulled by praise or blame. Real power begins when you learn to manipulate opinion instead of obeying it. The crowd wants to believe it's in control. It wants to feel heard, validated, respected. But it is also deeply impressionable, emotional, and easily distracted. The wise don't fight against public opinion, they shape it. They learn to speak its language, to feed its symbols, to offer just enough performance to hold attention while making decisions that serve their deeper interests. When used correctly, public opinion becomes a leash in your hands, a tool to guide, to direct, to contain. Those who wear the leash live in constant fear of backlash. They fear the next headline, the next wave of disapproval, the next accusation. Their strategy is defensive. They apologize quickly, over-explain, seek approval from those who have no power to grant it. And every time they do, they shrink. Their authority becomes reactive, their identity molded by public demand rather than personal command. But when you hold the leash, you set the pace. You decide what the public sees, what they focus on, what they believe matters. You feed them victories, crises, heroes, and villains, all calculated to reinforce your image and distract from your vulnerabilities. You let them feel outrage when it suits you, and calm when you need order. The key is not truth, but timing, not transparency, but control. To hold the leash, you must understand narrative. You must know how to plant stories, how to deny without denying, how to speak powerfully while saying very little. You must create events that appear spontaneous but are entirely staged. You must allow just enough criticism to appear fair while silencing dissent that threatens your structure. And when the crowd begins to stray, you don't chase them. You lead them back with spectacle, fear, or hope. This is not about deceiving people endlessly. It's about understanding that the masses prefer emotion over fact, simplicity over nuance, and appearance over substance. Give them a feeling to believe in, and they'll follow. But once you begin bending to their feelings, you've lost your spine. You become a puppet in your own court. So never mistake applause for authority. Never let popularity decide principle. Use opinion, don't obey it. Guide it without being owned by it. Because when you wear the leash, you are always one scandal, one rumor, one shift in mood away from collapse. But when you hold the leash, the crowd moves with you. And by the time they notice, you've already led them where you wanted them to go. Men change their rulers more easily than their habits. Use that inertia. This is one of the most overlooked truths of human behavior. People may rebel against leaders, topple regimes, or shift allegiances, but they rarely change how they think, live, or respond. Their patterns of fear, loyalty, and desire remain largely the same, no matter who sits on the throne. Machiavelli understood that while power structures may shift, the deeper habits of the population, their rhythms, routines, and instincts, do not. And therein lies the opportunity for control. A new ruler who understands this does not waste time trying to reinvent society. He does not demand immediate change or impose unfamiliar values. Instead, he blends into what already exists. He studies the habits of the people, what they fear, what they celebrate, what they're used to obeying, and he adapts his rule to fit that mold. Because change, especially abrupt change, is threatening. Even when people think they want it, they subconsciously resist it. What they crave is familiarity with a fresh face. Not new rules, just new rulers. This is why revolutions often end up replacing one system with another that looks remarkably similar. The language might change. The slogans evolve. But the basic structure, the social hierarchy, the distribution of fear and reward, the patterns of obedience, stay the same. Because human nature hasn't shifted. And a clever ruler knows to work with that inertia, not against it. Habits create predictability. And predictability is control. If you understand that men prefer the discomfort they know over the discomfort they don't, then you can gradually shift power while making it feel like nothing has changed. Introduce new policies under old traditions. Attach your authority to familiar symbols. Let them see continuity, even as you subtly redirect their loyalty from the past to yourself. The failure of many new leaders comes from trying to reshape the population too quickly. They imagine that because they are new, they must also be different. But difference provokes fear, and fear, when unaligned with structure, breeds resistance. The better path is to anchor yourself in what the people already do, already believe, already expect, and then, from that place of comfort, begin to steer them. Machiavelli would advise, be patient with transformation. People will change rulers in a heartbeat if they believe it benefits them. But to change their underlying habits, that takes years, generations even. And even then, they don't truly change. They adapt on the surface, but return to form the moment the pressure lifts. So the smart leader exploits this. He doesn't need to win hearts by changing minds. He only needs to present himself as a better guardian of the people's existing habits than the last man. Show them you understand their world. Show them you can protect their way of life, even as you quietly shift the rules behind the curtain. That is how power is maintained, not through forceful reformation, but through strategic accommodation. Let them think they chose a new path. What they really did was choose a new guide to walk the same road. The one who controls the narrative wins the war. Battles are fought with weapons, but wars are won with stories. Machiavelli understood that power isn't just about strategy or strength, it's about belief. And belief is shaped by narrative. It determines who is seen as the hero, who is labeled the villain, and what actions are judged as justified or condemned. Control the story, and you control perception. Control perception, and you control behavior. Facts alone do not move people. What moves them is how those facts are framed. A brutal strike can be seen as tyranny or as justice, depending on the narrative surrounding it. A leader's failure can be remembered as a betrayal or reframed as a noble sacrifice. The same action, seen through a different lens, leads to entirely different consequences. This is why those who rise to power are not always the strongest or the smartest, but often the best storytellers. In modern warfare, in politics, in business, the narrative is the battlefield. When you own the narrative, you don't need to silence your enemies. You simply discredit them. You redefine their actions before they can explain them. You shape how they are remembered before they can finish speaking. And once public opinion is captured by your version of events, resistance becomes noise. You're not just leading, you're defining reality itself. This is why control of media, information flow, and messaging has always been central to power. Those who underestimate the power of the story often find themselves defeated even when they win battles. They crush opposition with force, only to lose legitimacy in the eyes of the people. They succeed strategically, but fail narratively. And in the long term, narrative outlasts victories. Every ruler, every empire, every movement that has endured learned to shape the story. They crafted myths around their origins, heroes around their leaders, and meaning around their sacrifices. They didn't just demand loyalty, they inspired belief. Because people will die for an idea far faster than they will die for a plan. And once the idea takes root, it spreads, infects, recruits, and sustains itself, even without constant reinforcement. To control the narrative, you must master 3 things: timing, framing, and repetition. Timing means releasing your version of events before anyone else does, because the first story heard often becomes the default. Framing means presenting your actions in a way that appeals to the audience's values, fears, and hopes. And repetition ensures your message becomes embedded, repeated not just by you, but by the people themselves. This doesn't mean lying. It means understanding that all communication is persuasive. Every message is an attempt to shape thought. Even silence tells a story. And if you don't shape the narrative, someone else will, possibly your enemy, and they will use that story as a weapon against you. Wars are remembered not by who bled the most, but by who wrote the ending. Those who control the narrative don't just win, they define what winning means. They choose who is mourned, who is celebrated, and what lessons are passed down. And in doing so, they don't just win the present, they conquer the future. Always reward betrayal when it serves your interest. Loyalty is valuable, but it is not always efficient. When someone is willing to betray their own side to serve you, they are demonstrating not only boldness, but also usefulness. Machiavelli understood that betrayal, while often condemned publicly, is one of the most powerful tools in the realpolitik arsenal. It is the mechanism through which empires fall, regimes change, and power shifts hands. When it appears at your door, the wise do not recoil, they calculate. To reward betrayal is to incentivize it. You show others that turning on your enemies comes with a payoff. You create a culture where people begin to question their allegiances. They weigh the cost of loyalty against the reward of defection. And if you are smart, you make that reward visible, public, undeniable, and beneficial. People follow incentives far more reliably than they follow ideals. But the key is in the condition, when it serves your interest. Betrayal for its own sake is chaos. It must serve a purpose. If someone switches sides and brings no advantage, no access, no secrets, no leverage, then they are not a tool. They are a liability. But if their betrayal gives you a strategic edge, then you use it. You reward it. And you do so visibly because it sends a message. Power is fluid, and those who adapt to it early are welcomed. This is especially potent in times of instability. When your enemy's camp is divided, uncertain, or fearful, offering rewards for betrayal creates fractures. You force your adversaries to second-guess their own people. Paranoia sets in. Trust breaks down. Leadership begins to erode from within, not because you attacked directly, but because you turned loyalty into a question mark. There is also a psychological advantage. The person who betrays has committed an irreversible act. They've burned bridges. They know they cannot return. That makes them more loyal to you, at least for a time. They have more to prove. They understand their survival now depends on serving your cause. And if you reward them well, you deepen that dependency. You turn a former enemy into a servant, not just through payment, but through necessity. Yet caution is required. Rewarding betrayal is not the same as trusting the betrayer. You use them. You don't embrace them blindly. After all, someone who betrays once may betray again, but that risk is part of the game. The point is not to build relationships based on faith, but on leverage. You must know more than they think you know. You must hold something over them, or ensure their fortunes are so tied to yours that betrayal becomes illogical. Publicly, you may still denounce betrayal, label it dishonorable, even as you reward it privately. This maintains the illusion of values while still exploiting reality. Because the truth is, power does not care how it arrives, it only cares that it does. And betrayal, when aimed in the right direction, is often the shortest path to victory. So reward betrayal, not out of sentiment, but out of strategy. When it brings you closer to your goal, it is not treachery. It is opportunity. And the wise know how to recognize opportunity, even when it wears the face of a traitor. Power is taken, never given. Those who wait to be handed power remain waiting forever. No one willingly parts with control, influence, or authority. Power is a resource, scarce, precious, and fiercely defended. And like any valuable resource, it must be seized. Machiavelli understood this fundamental law. Those who rise do so not because someone opened the door, but because they pushed it open themselves, often breaking the lock in the process. The myth that power is granted to the most deserving is a comforting illusion. In reality, power is not a reward. It is a conquest. People in positions of power may talk about fairness, succession, or meritocracy, but beneath that surface lies a constant struggle to hold their place. They will praise talent, but suppress it when it threatens them. They will promise opportunity, but delay it when it draws too near. This is why those who rise are not always the most qualified. They are the most determined, the most strategic, and the least willing to wait. To take power is to challenge the current order. It means disrupting comfort, defying hierarchy, and accepting the risks that come with ambition. It requires calculation, timing, and the ability to sense weakness in those above you. Power is almost never seized by brute force alone. It is taken with subtlety, by exploiting cracks, winning allies, spreading influence, and eroding the authority of those who stand in your way. And once you have it, you must never forget how it was taken, because others will come for it just as you did. This is why rulers, CEOs, commanders, anyone with true influence, rarely appear vulnerable. They speak with certainty, project confidence, and make decisive moves not because they are invincible, but because they know that power leaks the moment it looks unguarded. Those who are in power will always frame their rule as legitimate, natural, or even benevolent. But legitimacy is often retroactive. It's assigned after the fact, once power has been secured. History remembers successful grabs for power as revolutions, not crimes. The very act of taking power rewrites the rules of how it was obtained. This is why asking for permission is a mistake. Those who are already powerful may smile and flatter, but they will not lift you above them. They might mentor you, applaud your growth, or include you in their plans, but always with boundaries. True ascension requires crossing those boundaries. It means stepping beyond the roles you've been assigned, challenging those who claim control, and refusing to be confined by titles or timelines. Waiting breeds stagnation. Those who wait too long to claim what they deserve watch others, bolder, less qualified, rise ahead of them. Because the world respects force. It respects assertion. Power gravitates toward those who act, not those who ask. So if you want power, take it. Build your strategy. Watch for the moment. Step forward without apology. Because those who succeed don't inherit power. They seize it. And once it's in your hands, no one can take it back unless you forget how you got it in the first place. Don't let gratitude blind you. People serve their own ends. Loyalty, when viewed through the lens of power, is rarely as pure as it seems. People may bow, praise, or even swear allegiance, but underneath those gestures is a far more reliable truth: self-interest. Machiavelli understood this better than anyone. Gratitude is a fragile emotion, easily overwhelmed by ambition, fear, or new opportunity. To assume someone's past loyalty guarantees future loyalty is to make a fatal mistake. Gratitude fades. Advantage remains. The mistake many leaders make is believing that the favors they've granted have created permanent bonds. They think helping someone, promoting them or protecting them buys lasting allegiance. But in reality, most people see such favors as steps, not debts. Once they receive what they want, their focus shifts. They no longer look backward at who helped them, but forward to what they can gain next. And if your presence no longer offers benefit, they will not hesitate to drift or even betray. That's why gratitude is dangerous when it clouds judgment. It creates emotional debt, not strategic clarity. You begin to see people as loyal because they should be, not because they are. You excuse signs of disloyalty. You rationalize disrespect. You assume they'll never turn against you because of all you've done for them. But power doesn't operate on sentiment. It operates on leverage. Understanding this doesn't require cynicism. It requires realism. You must see relationships for what they are, alliances of mutual benefit. When your interests and theirs align, loyalty appears. When they diverge, that loyalty disappears. It's not personal. It's not cruel. It's simply how human nature operates. The wise leader maintains control not by expecting gratitude, but by maintaining relevance. You make yourself continually useful, continually feared, or continually necessary. You don't rest on what you've given. You reinforce your position through what you still control. That could be opportunity, protection, status, or resources. People stay loyal when it benefits them, and they leave when it doesn't. Gratitude has very little to do with it. You must also recognize the signs when gratitude is being weaponized. Some will pretend to be thankful to buy time, to keep you unaware of their growing ambitions. They'll flatter, remind you of your generosity, and even praise your leadership, while laying the groundwork to move beyond you. And if you're blinded by their words, you'll miss the quiet preparation for betrayal happening right under your nose. This is why Machiavellian thinking demands emotional detachment. You can value loyalty but never assume it. You can be generous, but never expect eternal repayment. Your eyes must remain clear. Watch actions more than words. Trust motives more than memories. Never let past service distract you from present behavior. Because in the end, people follow power, not history. They remember what serves them now, not what served them once. And the leader who survives is not the one who expects gratitude, but the one who keeps the upper hand, no matter how much loyalty they've given or received. Use religion, morals, or patriotism as tools, never as personal beliefs. ChatGPT said, use religion, morals, or patriotism as tools, never as personal beliefs. Power requires clarity. Clarity about what truly motivates people and how systems of control are built. Machiavelli understood that belief systems, be they religious, moral, or nationalistic, are among the most effective instruments for shaping behavior. They inspire loyalty, justify obedience, and keep large populations aligned without the constant use of force. But for the ruler, for the strategist, these belief systems must be viewed for what they are, tools, not truths. To the masses, belief offers identity and meaning. People crave a sense of purpose beyond themselves. They want to believe their suffering has value, their obedience has reward, and their leaders are divinely or morally justified. This is not weakness, it's predictability. And what is predictable can be directed. When you position yourself as the protector of faith, virtue, or country, you tap into something primal. You make yourself bigger than your office. You become the embodiment of their values, and with that comes immense influence. But the moment you begin to believe your own propaganda, you lose your edge. You become bound by the very rules you use to bind others. You hesitate when strategy demands action because morality forbids it. You delay necessary ruthlessness, fearing spiritual or ideological consequences. You limit your own options while your enemies, who may pretend to share your beliefs, exploit every loophole to destroy you. This is the difference between the ruler and the ruled. The ruler uses belief. He invokes God, justice, and the flag when it solidifies his base, when it quiets dissent, or when it justifies war. He gives sermons, delivers speeches, commissions symbols, and raises banners, not because he's beholden to them, but because he understands their emotional power. People will suffer for a deity, die for a cause, and sacrifice comfort for country. A ruler who learns to speak in these terms can command armies without force, silence critics without violence, and rule without resistance. History is full of leaders who cloaked their ambitions in holy or nationalistic language. They conquered not by brute strength alone, but by aligning their goals with the moral structure of the people. They painted their enemies as heretics, traitors, or degenerates. They didn't ask for obedience. They demanded it in the name of something greater. And the people complied, not because they were coerced, but because they believed. However, when leaders mistake the illusion for the substance, when they become zealots instead of architects, they often fall. They lose flexibility. They alienate allies. They begin to fight for purity instead of survival, for doctrine instead of dominance. And those who once followed them for power's sake begin to abandon them, recognizing that belief without control is a suicide mission. So be clear, use belief, but do not be consumed by it. Let others wear the symbols and chant the slogans. You remain behind the curtain, directing the stage. Faith, morality, patriotism, they are powerful spells. Cast them as needed, inspire with them, manipulate through them, but never confuse the spell with the spellcaster. You are not the believer, you are the one they believe in, and that distinction is what keeps you in power. Be ruthless with timing, strike before your enemy suspects. Victory often depends less on strength and more on when you choose to act. Timing is the invisible force behind power. Machiavelli understood that a perfectly executed strategy at the wrong moment can fail, while a bold, even reckless move made at the right moment can succeed beyond expectation. The element of surprise, the ability to act before your opponent is ready, is one of the most decisive advantages in any contest of power. To win, you must be faster than doubt, bolder than hesitation, and colder than sentiment. Your enemy is most dangerous when they have time to prepare. Time gives them the opportunity to build alliances, reinforce their position, analyze your behavior, and develop countermeasures. Every moment you delay out of fear, comfort, or false hope gives them room to adapt. But if you strike early, before they understand your intentions, before they have a chance to respond, you force them into chaos. You shift the battlefield to your terms, making them reactive, not proactive. And once they're reacting, they're losing. Ruthlessness in timing means you act when it's uncomfortable, when others say it's too soon, when the target believes they're safe, when your power appears quiet. It's in these moments that the impact is greatest. The shock disorients. The swiftness dismantles resistance. What might have required a long campaign can be accomplished in a single, unexpected blow. This principle isn't limited to military or political conflict. It applies to business, influence, personal dynamics. Waiting for permission, the perfect conditions, or popular support often ensures that the window of opportunity closes before you move. By the time consensus is built, the advantage is lost. The true strategist anticipates the shift and moves just before it becomes obvious to others. This requires sharp observation. You must study your rivals, not only their actions, but their rhythms. Everyone has blind spots, moments of complacency, routines they trust too much. These are the openings. Watch for overconfidence, distraction, transition. Most people let their guard down when they feel secure. That's the moment to strike, not with noise, but with precision. Being ruthless with timing also means sacrificing comfort. You don't act when you feel ready. You act when the opportunity is most vulnerable, even if you're still assembling your strength. You risk being imperfect in execution in exchange for perfect positioning. And you must resist the temptation to wait for more information. Hesitation kills. By the time you have all the facts, your enemy has moved. By the time everyone agrees it's time to act, the moment has passed. Power does not wait. Neither should you. In the world of strategy, there are no rewards for being polite, cautious, or late. Strike before your enemy suspects, and you control not just the outcome, but the narrative. You become the force that shaped events, not the one who merely reacted to them. And those who are shaped by your timing will never forget how quickly they fell. Never let emotions interrupt advantage. Power belongs to those who can keep their head when others lose theirs. Machiavelli knew that the most dangerous moment for any strategist is not when the odds are against them, but when emotions threaten to override judgment. Anger, pride, guilt, or even love, when left unchecked, can sabotage long-term advantage. The battlefield of power is littered with the wreckage of leaders who had the upper hand but let emotion drive their next move. To maintain control, you must master yourself before you master others. Emotions are not inherently weak. They are human, but in the pursuit of power, they must be subordinate to strategy. The moment you act out of personal offense, impulsive rage, or sentimental loyalty, you are no longer in command. You are reacting. And reaction in the game of power is a losing position. Those who can provoke you can control you. Those who can anticipate your emotional responses can manipulate your behavior, bait you into conflict, or distract you from opportunity. This is why the greatest power players often appear cold or unfeeling. It's not that they lack emotion. It's that they refuse to let it dictate their decisions. They understand that a single misstep driven by ego or impulse can undo years of calculated work. So they absorb insults, delay gratification, and withhold vengeance. Not because they are weak, but because they are focused on the bigger picture. Advantage requires patience. It means allowing disrespect to go unanswered if the response would cost more than it gains. It means delaying retaliation until the strike will serve a larger purpose. It means letting a rival believe they've won, only to dismantle them at a more opportune moment. Emotions demand immediacy. Strategy demands timing. Consider the leader who lashes out at criticism. The moment they do, they reveal insecurity. They lower themselves to the level of the critic, and worse, they allow their opponent to set the terms of engagement. Now the leader is reacting, not leading. But the strategist who absorbs the blow and waits, who turns criticism into fuel for repositioning, wins not only the argument, but the perception war. In relationships, both personal and professional, the same principle holds. Emotional decisions may feel righteous, but they often leave you exposed. Apologies made too quickly, anger expressed too freely, alliances broken too impulsively. These are the cracks that give your enemies leverage. Hold your line. Speak when silence is more dangerous than words. Move when emotion has cooled into clarity. This does not mean becoming emotionless. It means becoming emotionally disciplined. You feel, but you choose. You suffer, but you wait. You want, but you calculate. Your emotions are your fire, not your compass. Let others be ruled by their reactions. Let them reveal their hand, show their weakness, and bleed their advantage in the name of pride. You stay still. You stay focused. And when the time is right, when the emotional storm has passed and the field is clear, you act, not from passion, but from precision. That is how advantage becomes victory. Not by force, but by restraint. Not by feeling, but by control. Kindness unguarded becomes a weapon against you. Kindness, when offered without caution or control, transforms from a strength into a liability. It becomes a signal to the observant, a map for the manipulative. Machiavelli understood that while kindness has its place in leadership, it must be guarded, deliberate, and measured. Unchecked, it invites exploitation. It attracts those who see your compassion not as a virtue, but as a weakness to exploit. When kindness is automatic, unconditional, and untested, it teaches others how to take advantage of you. It creates expectations, then demands. You offer support once, and it is appreciated. You offer it twice, and it is expected. Offer it again, and it becomes entitlement. Eventually, your kindness no longer registers as generosity, but as obligation. People stop thanking you and start resenting you the moment you say no. What once earned you loyalty now breeds dependency, and dependency turns hostile when interrupted. The cruel irony is that the more generous you are without boundaries, the more you invite disrespect. Not because people are inherently evil, but because power dynamics are real, and human nature tilts toward self-interest. People test limits. They learn how far they can push. If you never enforce boundaries, they conclude there aren't any. And if there aren't any, you are no longer seen as a leader. They see you as a resource, one they're entitled to drain. True kindness is not passive. It is strategic. It knows when to say yes and when to say no. It distinguishes between the grateful and the opportunistic. A leader who is kind must also be firm, because kindness that cannot say no is not kindness. It's compliance. And the moment people realize you'll bend every time they apply pressure, they'll turn your own nature against you. They will guilt you, flatter you, and wear you down, all in the name of values they themselves do not respect. This is how kindness becomes weaponized. It's used to trap you in moral dilemmas. If you were truly good, they say, you would help again. Or, "You help them, why not me?" And just like that, your leadership is no longer based on judgment, but on appeasement. Your standards erode, your decisions become inconsistent, and your authority begins to crumble under the very weight of your good intentions. Guarded kindness, on the other hand, is respected. When people know you are capable of compassion and consequence, your kindness becomes powerful. It's a reward, not a loophole. It's remembered because it is rare. When people know that your kindness must be earned, they value it more. They do not take it for granted, and they think twice before crossing the line that would forfeit it. This balance between heart and discipline is what makes a ruler not just effective, but enduring. Be kind, but never at the cost of your authority. Help others, but not to your own detriment. Lead with warmth, but defend it with steel. Because the moment your kindness becomes predictable, it ceases to be a virtue and becomes a weapon others will not hesitate to turn against you. Men admire success, not how it was gained. The world claims to value integrity, fairness, and honesty, but it is mesmerized by outcomes. Machiavelli understood that results speak louder than methods, and society, for all its moral posturing, is ultimately drawn to those who win. Whether by cunning, force, manipulation, or genuine talent, success blinds the masses to the steps it took to achieve it. A victorious figure is praised, remembered, and followed, not because they played fair, but because they emerged at the top. People love a story of triumph. They idolize the conqueror, the tycoon, the political leader who rose from nothing to everything. But rarely do they examine the trail of broken promises, ruthless tactics, or moral compromises left behind. Why? Because success validates itself. Once a person has reached power or prestige, their path becomes a subject of fascination, not judgment. Their vices are reframed as bold decisions. Their betrayals are rebranded as necessary sacrifices. The narrative is rewritten to suit the outcome. This is the advantage of power. It allows you to control the story. If you win, you decide how your journey is told. Even brutal methods can be made to look noble once the result is undeniable. A dictator is called a reformer. A manipulator is called a strategist. A liar becomes a visionary. The public, hungry for heroes, will often fill in the moral blanks with admiration, because deep down they respect effectiveness over purity. Failure, by contrast, receives no such courtesy. A man who fails, no matter how honest, ethical, or well-intentioned, is rarely celebrated. His goodness is used to explain his downfall. He was too nice, they say, too naive. Morality in failure is seen as weakness, but ruthlessness in success is seen as strength. This is why the wise do not pursue virtue at the expense of victory. They understand that the world forgives winners, not saints. This doesn't mean abandoning all principles. It means prioritizing impact over appearances. You can still maintain ethics, but never let them override the goal. Because if you fail, those ethics will not protect you from obscurity, irrelevance, or criticism. But if you succeed, even questionable choices can be reframed as brilliance. The same crowd that once questioned your ambition will now call it destiny. Men admire those who rise because they embody the hunger everyone feels but few act on. They represent what people wish they could be. Decisive, relentless, untouchable. That admiration has little to do with whether the path was clean. It is about the fact that they reached a place most people never will. And in that success lies a kind of unspoken forgiveness, even admiration for whatever means it took to get there. So do not obsess over being liked as you climb. Do not expect applause for playing fair. Focus on finishing first, because in the end, history will not remember the rules you followed. It will remember the crown you wore. Men do not follow the most moral, they follow the most victorious. And once you stand at the top, the world will ask how you did it, not to judge you, but to imitate you. When the people are distracted, quietly change the game. Distraction is not just a moment of vulnerability, it is an opportunity. Machiavelli understood that power does not always shift in the open. It shifts in the silence, in the noise, in the haze, when attention is pointed elsewhere. When the crowd is focused on spectacle, scandal, or conflict, the wise ruler moves in the background, altering rules, shifting alliances, and redrawing the lines of control without resistance. People cannot resist what they do not notice, and distraction, when properly leveraged, is the perfect camouflage for transformation. The masses are easily captivated. Drama, fear, entertainment, these pull focus faster than policy or structure ever could. Leaders who understand this don't fight against it. They use it. They create distractions when needed or exploit existing ones. A crisis, let it dominate the headlines. A controversy, let it consume the discourse. While everyone is watching the fire, you rewrite the script. The brilliance of this tactic lies in its subtlety. Change the law while they argue about the news. Replace key figures while their eyes are on a celebrity scandal. Restructure power, eliminate threats, or consolidate control, all while pretending nothing significant is happening. And when they finally look up, the world has already changed. This strategy requires planning and patience. You must be able to anticipate where public attention will go and prepare your moves in advance. You don't act when scrutiny is high. You wait. You observe. You let the noise build, then you slip through it. By the time they try to hold you accountable, the damage or the advantage is already done. Consider how many times in history this has played out. A major policy passed during a national crisis. Executive powers expanded while the public panicked over external threats. Surveillance programs rolled out during times of chaos. The people never saw the shift happen. They were too busy reacting to the storm, never noticing that the ground beneath them was being replaced. This doesn't only apply to governments. In business and institutions, even in personal relationships, the same principle holds. People are less resistant to change when they are distracted. They do not defend the old order if they're not paying attention to its collapse. You can introduce new leadership, new systems, even new loyalties, all while the focus is elsewhere. And when the distraction ends, the new game is already in motion. But timing is everything. If you act too soon, you face resistance. If you wait too long, the window closes. You must be ruthless and precise. Not every distraction is useful. Not every noise creates the cover you need. But when the moment is right, when eyes are off the prize, that's when you strike, not loudly, but invisibly. Because true power doesn't always come from seizing the stage. It often comes from shifting the stage itself, while the audience is too distracted to notice the curtains have moved. Control the moment of inattention, and you control the entire direction of what comes next. Change the game quietly, and by the time they realize, they're already playing by your rules. Remove threats entirely. Partial mercy is future rebellion. In matters of power, leaving enemies half defeated is one of the most dangerous mistakes a leader can make. Machiavelli understood that unfinished punishment invites unfinished loyalty. When you neutralize a threat but allow it to survive, whether out of sentiment, fear, or indecision, you create the conditions for future defiance. The enemy you spare does not become your friend. They become a wound that never heals, a rival biding their time, watching for weakness, and preparing their return. Mercy feels noble, but in power it must be measured with precision. A threat that is too weak to be dangerous may be spared as a display of strength. but a threat that still possesses ambition, resources, or influence must be removed entirely. Anything less is a gamble with your future. You give them time to regroup, forge alliances, and turn sympathy into support. What you framed as compassion will be remembered as hesitation. This is why decisive action is not cruelty, it's prevention. It sends a message not only to the defeated, but to everyone else watching. It establishes that rebellion, betrayal, and opposition come with irreversible consequences. It closes the door to second chances and eliminates the illusion that power can be challenged without cost. In doing so, it deters others from making the same mistake. Fear, in this context, is more effective than gratitude. The instinct to show mercy often comes from ego. Leaders want to be seen as magnanimous, as morally superior to their enemies. They believe that sparing a rival proves their strength. But more often than not, it proves only that they're vulnerable to emotional reasoning. The spared enemy may smile, may kneel, may even pledge loyalty, but beneath that gesture lies a memory, a humiliation, a burning desire to restore what was lost. They will thank you publicly and then plot your downfall privately. History offers countless examples. Rebellious generals allowed to live who later sparked civil wars. Dethroned rulers exiled rather than executed, returning years later to reclaim power. Rivals disgraced but left alive, eventually rising through sympathy and vengeance to destroy the very leaders who showed them mercy. These are not coincidences. They are the direct result of failing to eliminate a threat completely. The wise ruler does not act with rage. They act with resolve. Removing a threat isn't about revenge. It's about ensuring stability. A clean break, a final end, leaves no room for resurgence. It clears the chessboard and allows new moves to be made without looking over your shoulder. It allows you to govern from strength, not from fear of ghosts. Partial measures send mixed messages. They signal that you are capable of force, but unwilling to follow through, that you are willing to punish, but not fully. This emboldens your rivals. It creates martyrs, and martyrs become movements. So when the time comes to deal with a threat, deal with it completely. No half measures, no room for return, because what you spare today will rise tomorrow with sharper teeth and a clearer memory of your hesitation. Generosity wins affection, but empties coffers. Be strategic. Generosity, when used with intent, is a powerful tool. It buys loyalty, silences critics, and builds a reputation that can open doors without force. But when given indiscriminately, without strategy or restraint, it becomes a drain on your resources, your influence, and your authority. Machiavelli warned that while people love a generous ruler, they do not love a bankrupt one. Generosity must serve a purpose, not a compulsion. The first danger of unchecked generosity is its tendency to create expectation. Give freely once, and people call you kind. Give freely twice, and they call you noble. Give a third time, and they begin to expect it. What once felt like a gift becomes an entitlement. If you ever stop or scale back, you are not praised for what you gave. You are criticized for what you no longer give. The affection generosity wins is shallow and often temporary. Moreover, generosity that lacks boundaries undermines discipline. When people are rewarded too easily or too often, they lose their motivation to earn. Incentives fade. Entitlement grows. Eventually, you create an environment where loyalty depends not on principle or shared vision, but on your continued willingness to give. The moment you say no, loyalty disappears, replaced by bitterness or betrayal. That's why true generosity must be selective, strategic. It should be reserved for key moments and critical relationships. Give where it strengthens alliances. Give where it secures long-term loyalty. Give when the return is greater than the cost. Your generosity must be a calculated investment, not a compulsive habit. Each act should reinforce your position, not weaken it. It is far wiser to be seen as just than to be seen as endlessly generous. Justice sustains order. It earns respect. It establishes a foundation for stable leadership. Generosity, on the other hand, risks creating a fragile empire, one that thrives only so long as the gifts keep flowing. And when the resources run dry, so too does the affection. Consider also how generosity is perceived by rivals. Excessive giving can be seen as desperation, as weakness, as a bribe for loyalty you haven't earned through strength or vision. Strategic opponents will see through this and exploit it. They will let you exhaust your wealth trying to win hearts, then strike when your hands are empty and your supporters vanish. Instead, let your generosity be rare and meaningful. When you reward, do it publicly and with purpose. When you give, tie it to performance, to loyalty proven, not just claimed. Use rewards to shape behavior, to set examples, to inspire competition. And always maintain the ability to say no without guilt. A ruler who controls their generosity controls their treasury, their influence, and their image. One who gives to be loved soon finds themselves resented when the giving stops. So be generous, yes, but be feared more than loved, respect more than adored. Give with the same sharp awareness with which you lead. Because in the end, affection bought too cheaply dissolves the moment the gold is gone. But strategic generosity, used sparingly, with purpose, builds loyalty that lasts. Don't correct people's illusions. Use them. Most people do not want truth. They want certainty. They want to believe in the stories that make them feel safe, justified, important, or in control. These illusions are not flaws in the human condition. They are its architecture. And anyone who seeks power, influence, or leadership must understand this. It is far more effective to work within people's illusions than to shatter them. Correction breeds resistance, but affirmation, when done strategically, breeds control. When someone holds a false belief about the world, about themselves, or about you, it is tempting to correct it, especially if you value truth. But the truth often destabilizes. It threatens identity, pride, and emotional safety. Most people respond not with gratitude, but with denial, anger, or retreat. You may be right, but you lose influence. You become the enemy of their comfort, the bearer of disruption. And that is a position of weakness in the realm of persuasion. Machiavelli would warn against this kind of idealism. If a person believes they are wise, capable, or noble, let them believe it, especially if that belief causes them to act in a way that benefits you. If someone thinks you are more generous, more moral, or more dependent than you really are, do not correct them. These illusions can be shaped into useful leverage. People act according to how they perceive reality, not how it actually is. The one who influences perception controls the outcome. This principle applies at every level. In politics, leaders do not always correct the fantasies of their citizens. They guide them. They promise change while preserving structure. They create narratives of destiny, struggle, and victory, because those narratives inspire more action than policy ever could. In business, a brand sells more than a product. It sells an identity, a feeling, an illusion, and that illusion becomes a source of loyalty far stronger than reason. Even in personal relationships, illusions play a role. People want to feel understood, admired, needed. If you break those illusions, even gently, you risk damaging the connection. But if you reinforce them, if you reflect back what they want to believe, you build trust, even if it's based on selective truth. That trust becomes your foothold for influence. You don't need to lie. You simply choose which truths to emphasize and which to leave unspoken. The most skillful leaders are those who can recognize the illusions of others and subtly steer them. They do not wage war on delusion. They guide it toward useful ends. If a rival overestimates their support, let them act on that illusion and overextend. If a subordinate believes they are indispensable, let them believe it, so they work harder to prove themselves. You gain more by allowing people to act on their illusions than by confronting them with uncomfortable reality. Control doesn't require revelation. It requires calibration. People don't follow those who strip away their comfort. They follow those who make their illusions feel real, purposeful, even noble. So let others keep their masks. Let them hold their fantasies. Just make sure you're the one writing the script behind the scenes. Because the person who shapes the illusion doesn't need to destroy it. They only need to know it's not real. That knowledge alone is power. Victims make great martyrs, but only when they serve your image. In the world of influence and control, martyrdom is one of the most potent psychological weapons. The public has a deep emotional response to perceived injustice. They rally behind those who suffer, idolize the fallen, and mythologize their sacrifice. A victim elevated to the status of martyr becomes a symbol, one that can mobilize crowds, legitimize movements, and rewrite entire narratives. But this power, like all others, must be used carefully. Not all victims serve your image. Some weaken it, some outshine it. The key is not in the suffering itself, but in how and when that suffering is framed. Machiavelli understood that emotional energy must be harvested and redirected. If someone close to your cause is disgraced, attacked, or eliminated by rivals or by public opinion, you have a rare opportunity. Their pain, when amplified and framed correctly, becomes a tool. You can cast them as the embodiment of your ideals. You can turn their downfall into proof of your movement's righteousness. You shift the focus from their weakness to the cruelty of those who oppose them. In doing so, you gain sympathy and anger, two of the strongest public motivators. But timing and alignment are crucial. A martyr must reflect your values, not threaten them. If the victim is seen as too weak, too flawed, or too divisive, elevating them may backfire. They become a weight, not a weapon. The public may pity them, but they won't fight for them. Worse, their narrative might clash with yours, creating confusion or doubt. So you must choose wisely. Not every victim deserves a pedestal. Not every sacrifice is useful. A martyr also serves best when they direct attention toward your leadership. Their story should reinforce your authority, your struggle, your cause. It should not overshadow you. Martyrs who become too iconic may inspire a new movement, one you cannot control. They might become symbols for others, hijacked by those with different agendas. This is why, even as you honor a martyr, you must maintain narrative dominance. Their image must support your strategy, not replace it. In some cases, creating martyrs can be a deliberate move. A well-timed sacrifice, a staged injustice, or a high-profile downfall can provoke outrage and mobilize masses. It can justify retaliation, rally your base, and silence opposition, but this must be done with surgical precision. Manufactured martyrdom can just as easily be exposed and turned against you. The public's sympathy is powerful, but volatile. You must also be ready to distance yourself when a victim no longer serves your image. If the narrative shifts, if new information tarnishes the symbolism, you withdraw. Quietly, elegantly. You express regret, but refocus attention elsewhere. Martyrdom is only useful when it aligns with your path. When it does not, it becomes dead weight. And the wise know when to sever even the most emotional ties. So use martyrs, but do not become one. Celebrate sacrifice, but only when it strengthens your command. The crowd may cheer for the fallen, but they follow the one who knows how to turn sacrifice into strategy. Because in the end, public grief fades. but a well-crafted image can last for generations. People don't care who's right, they care who looks right. Truth is not the deciding factor in most conflicts. Appearance is. In the public arena, logic and facts are secondary to performance, confidence, and narrative control. Machiavelli understood that perception governs judgment. People are not objective. They don't weigh every piece of evidence or examine every side of a story. They respond to what they see, what they feel, and what fits the version of reality they already prefer to believe. Being right is not enough. If you present the truth clumsily, emotionally, or without poise, you'll lose to someone who lies with conviction. Because people don't follow the truth, they follow the person who looks like they have it. The one who speaks calmly while others shout. The one who smiles while others rage. The one who appears composed, strategic, and unbothered, even when chaos surrounds them. Every courtroom, every political debate, every public scandal proves this point. The party that controls the optics often wins, not because they're innocent or correct, but because they appear stronger, more believable, more relatable. A person who is factually wrong, but communicates with clarity and confidence, will often appear more trustworthy than someone who is factually right, but disorganized, nervous, or defensive. People conflate style with substance, and perception with truth. This is why narrative control is more powerful than evidence. If you frame your story first, you dictate how every fact that follows is interpreted. If your version of events reaches the public before your opponents, you create a lens through which everything else is filtered. Even if the truth eventually comes out, most people won't change their mind. They'll double down on the version they already accepted because it feels familiar, safe, and emotionally satisfying. This is why it's dangerous to assume that being right will protect you. It won't. People won't investigate unless forced. They won't dig for truth unless compelled. They go with what looks and sounds convincing. This is not a flaw. It's a feature of human psychology. People are overwhelmed with information, so they use shortcuts, tone, body language, social consensus. If you master these, you win the crowd, regardless of whether your position is flawless. That's why the wise don't argue for truth's sake alone. They argue for position, for dominance, for control of the frame. They ask, how does this sound? Not just, is this true? They think visually. They think emotionally. They craft messages that stick, not because they are perfect, but because they are persuasive. Even in defeat, someone who looks composed and principled can maintain power. And even in victory, someone who looks desperate and erratic can lose influence. It's not about who had the better argument. It's about who created the stronger impression. So don't waste time begging people to recognize the truth. Show them what they want to see and lead them to the truth through the performance. Because in the world of power, victory belongs not to the one who is right, but to the one who makes being right look undeniable. Virtue without strength is vanity. To be good without the power to enforce, defend, or uphold that goodness is to live in illusion. Virtue by itself may be admirable, but without strength behind it, it is toothless. It becomes a performance, a decoration, a soft ideal that collapses at the first challenge. Machiavelli understood that morality means little unless it is backed by force, by influence, by the capacity to protect and sustain it, in a world where others are not bound by your same principles. Many people cling to virtue because it gives them a sense of identity, superiority, or clarity. They speak of justice, fairness, and compassion with conviction. But when pressed, when tested by conflict, opposition, or betrayal, they have no power to act. They become victims of their own ideals. Because the world is not ruled by ideals, it is ruled by the strong. And the strong are not always good. Often they are ruthless. And when virtue meets ruthlessness without strength, it gets crushed. This is why virtue must be coupled with the will and means to defend it. A leader who is just but afraid to punish will be ignored. A person who is honest but unwilling to confront liars will be manipulated. A voice of morality that cannot influence behavior is simply background noise in the struggle for power. And worse, once exposed as powerless, that virtue may even become a target. People will mock it, exploit it, use it to justify their own aggression. What begins as principle ends as weakness. Virtue becomes real only when it can hold the line, when it can say, "This is right," and make that stance matter. Strength is what gives your ethics teeth. It enforces boundaries. It commands respect. It deters challenge. You don't need to be violent or cruel. You simply need to be undeniable. When people know you have the means to act, your morality becomes more than theory. It becomes law. This does not mean abandoning virtue. On the contrary, virtue guided by strength is one of the most powerful forces in leadership. It creates order, inspires loyalty, and builds lasting respect. But the order must be enforced. The loyalty must be earned and maintained. And respect must be grounded in fear as much as admiration. People do not follow the good because they are good. They follow the good when they are also strong. There are countless examples of moral individuals who rose to power only to be destroyed because they lacked the strength to protect their values. They were overtaken by more aggressive, more strategic, more pragmatic opponents who had no such illusions about the world. They mistook admiration for authority. And when real decisions had to be made, when conflict arose, they were sidelined, outmaneuvered, or eliminated. So build virtue, but also build strength. Speak of justice, but be ready to enforce it. Promote peace, but prepare for war. Kindness, honesty, fairness, these are noble aims. But without strength, they are fragile. They serve more to elevate your ego than to change the world. And when virtue becomes vanity, it ceases to serve anyone but yourself. Fear outlives loyalty. Loyalty is often celebrated as the foundation of leadership, but it is one of the most unstable currencies in the realm of power. It is emotional, conditional, and easily redirected. People are loyal as long as it benefits them, as long as you remain strong, generous, or useful. But the moment circumstances change, when your influence wanes, your wealth diminishes, or your popularity falters, loyalty evaporates. Those who once stood by your side will distance themselves, some slowly, others instantly. Machiavelli understood this well, and that is why he taught that fear, not love or loyalty, is the more enduring pillar of rule. Fear is grounded in survival. It does not ask to be understood or appreciated. It is not negotiated. It imposes itself. And once instilled, it persists long after affection has faded. When someone fears you, they factor that fear into their decisions. They hesitate before crossing you. They think twice before disobeying. Even if they hate you, even if they resent your power, that fear remains a barrier that loyalty alone can never provide. Loyalty, on the other hand, is tied to perception. It depends on how people feel about you, how inspired, respected, or valued they believe themselves to be. It is often confused with friendship or admiration, but it is not the same. Loyalty is a fragile thing. It's tested by rumors, by hardship, by shifting alliances. It is easily bought, easily lost, and nearly impossible to guarantee. A loyal follower may praise you today, then abandon you tomorrow if another figure offers more reward, more influence, or more hope. Loyalty follows warmth. Fear survives cold. This does not mean cruelty for cruelty's sake. Fear, to be effective, must be controlled. It must be precise. The kind of fear that endures is not one born of senseless brutality, but of demonstrated power. People must believe that crossing you has real consequences, swift, memorable, and preferably public. Once that belief is rooted in their minds, you don't need to enforce it constantly. The memory of consequence does the work for you. The ruler who relies on loyalty alone is constantly negotiating, appeasing, and making concessions. He is at the mercy of moods and emotions. He must always be giving attention, rewards, reassurance. But the ruler who uses fear strategically creates distance, authority, and control. He commands silence where others argue. He gets compliance where others beg. And when disloyalty arises, it is dealt with once, sharply, as an example. History is filled with leaders who inspired devotion and were eventually betrayed. Their mistake was in believing that emotional connection guarantees stability. But respect rooted in fear does not require constant maintenance. It survives gossip. It withstands temptation. It outlasts affection. Even when people stop believing in your cause, they will still remember the cost of defiance. So if you must choose, choose fear, not because it makes you hated, but because it makes you remembered. Because when loyalty fades with comfort and time, fear remains, quiet, buried, but alive. And in the quiet moments when your rule is tested, it is not love that protects you. It is the memory of what happens when your enemies cross the line. Nothing breeds rebellion like perceived weakness. Power is not just held, it must be projected. The moment people begin to believe you are weakening, their calculations change. Machiavelli understood that rebellion is not born from injustice alone, nor even from suffering. People will endure great hardship under a ruler they believe is strong. They will remain loyal under strict rule if they feel protected or if the alternative seems more dangerous. But when that strength begins to fade, or more precisely, when it appears to fade, the seeds of rebellion take root. Perception is key. You don't have to actually be vulnerable to lose control. You only need to look vulnerable. People watch for cracks in your authority, inconsistencies in your decisions, hesitation in your tone. They sense when your grip loosens. And once they sense weakness, they begin to test the boundaries, first in private, then in whispers, and finally in action. Authority, once questioned, becomes negotiable, and power, once doubted, becomes a target. This is why a ruler must always appear unshakable, even in crisis. Uncertainty must be masked with decisive action. Fear must be met with boldness. Any sign that you are struggling, doubting, or conceding too easily invites opportunists to step forward. Your enemies become emboldened. Your allies grow cautious. And those who were neutral begin to hedge their bets. It's not that they suddenly hate you, it's that they no longer believe you can win. History is full of leaders who fell not because they lost battles, but because they lost the image of control. A single defeat poorly handled, a minor scandal left uncontained, or an obvious show of desperation, these are enough to shift perception. And once perception shifts, rebellion becomes rational. It's not treason to abandon a sinking ship. It's survival. Even mercy, if misread, can appear as weakness. A pardon may be strategic, but if it's seen as softness, it sends the wrong message. Delays in judgment, excessive apologies, or public hand-wringing, these behaviors comfort no one. They only signal that the ruler is overwhelmed, that the center is not holding, that now is the time to move against them. To prevent rebellion, then, one must enforce the illusion of invincibility. You must act before dissent becomes visible, reward loyalty sharply, punish betrayal even more so. Never let your enemies recover. If you must crush a rival, do it completely. And if there is internal doubt, it must never show in public. Behind closed doors, you may adapt, you may struggle, but in front of the world, You must always look as if you are steps ahead, never behind. Ironically, a ruler can commit acts of great brutality and still avoid rebellion, if those acts are framed as strength. But show kindness at the wrong moment, hesitate in the face of challenge, or appear too eager to compromise, and people begin to believe they can do better without you. And that belief, once born, is nearly impossible to contain. So maintain your edge. Shape perception relentlessly. Because it's not actual weakness that invites rebellion, it's the belief that weakness exists. Once they believe you can be overthrown, the war has already begun. To protect your power, be willing to destroy your past. Power is not sustained through nostalgia. It is sustained through evolution. Those who cling to their past allies, past beliefs, past promises, often do so at the expense of their future. Machiavelli understood that to remain in power, a ruler must be adaptable, even if that means severing ties with the very foundations that once elevated them. The structures, people, and ideals that built your rise are not always suited to preserve your reign, and when they become liabilities, you must have the ruthlessness to let them burn. Loyalty to the past creates blind spots. It traps you in outdated alliances, old narratives, and rigid images of who you used to be. These attachments may win admiration from idealists or sentiment from the public, but they weaken your strategic freedom. The world changes. Circumstances shift. Enemies evolve. If you cannot evolve with them, if you remain bound by your former self, you will be outmaneuvered by someone less sentimental and more focused on survival. The past can also be used against you. Old alliances become leverage in the hands of rivals. Past decisions are reframed as failures. Previous loyalties become accusations of betrayal. The more visible your history, the more ammunition your enemies have. And if you are not willing to rewrite your own story, others will do it for you, often in ways that undermine your current power. This is why the wise ruler never lets history control the present. They reshape their narrative as needed. They are willing to disavow old causes, distance themselves from former allies, even contradict past statements if the moment demands it. Not out of dishonesty, but out of strategic necessity. Power is not about consistency. It is about dominance. And dominance requires flexibility, not just in action, but in identity. Many fear that abandoning their past makes them look untrustworthy. But power is not sustained by trust. It's sustained by results. If you are effective, if you continue to win, people will forget your contradictions. They will remember only your position. The public does not track your every ideological turn. They track your success. If rewriting your past secures your future, it is not betrayal. It is maintenance. Sometimes this means purging those who once supported you, the loyalist who now questions your direction, the ally who has become too powerful, the faction that no longer aligns with your new ambitions. These figures may have helped build your throne, but if they now threaten its stability, they must be removed. And if doing so means dismantling part of your legacy, so be it. The throne is more important than the road that led to it. To protect power, sentiment must be secondary. Reputation must be malleable. Legacy must be treated as a weapon, not a chain. Because in the end, the past is only useful if it serves the present. And if it doesn't, it must be rewritten, buried, or burned without hesitation. Power belongs to those who are willing to let go of who they were to become, who they must be. No man is your ally forever. Plan accordingly. In the pursuit and preservation of power, loyalty is always temporary. Alliances are formed not out of love or permanent loyalty, but out of aligned interest. The moment those interests diverge, or when one side believes they no longer need the other, the alliance begins to unravel. Machiavelli understood this as a central law of power. No matter how loyal someone appears today, the tides of ambition, fear, and opportunity can reshape their allegiance tomorrow. This is not a condemnation of human nature, it is a recognition of it. People serve themselves first, whether they admit it or not. Even the most devoted ally, the most trusted advisor, or the most vocal supporter is ultimately weighing their proximity to you against their own future. When being close to you brings advantage, they will sing your praises. But if your influence fades or your power wanes, they will begin to drift, or worse, turn. That's why alliances must always be treated as transactions. They are temporary contracts, not eternal bonds. You agree to cooperate because it suits both parties in that moment. You exchange value. You protect each other while it benefits you. But to assume permanence in such arrangements is to prepare for betrayal without knowing it. The wise ruler, leader, or strategist never lets their guard down completely. They honor the alliance, but they also prepare for its expiration. Planning accordingly means you build leverage even with your closest allies. You know their weaknesses. You understand their ambitions. You monitor their networks, their mood, their shifting priorities. You ensure they need you slightly more than you need them. If that balance changes, you adjust. You keep alternatives close, new alliances ready, loyal replacements trained, escape routes open. You do not let yourself become dependent on a single bond. Even when alliances end quietly, the damage can be profound if you're not prepared. A key supporter suddenly withholding resources, a longtime friend choosing neutrality in your time of need, a former partner joining a rival. These moves often come not with betrayal, but with silence, with absence. And that silence can cost you more than open rebellion, especially if you had allowed yourself to lean too heavily on the relationship. The illusion of eternal loyalty is comforting, but it's an illusion nonetheless. The more power you gain, the more your allies become potential rivals. The closer someone is to you, the more knowledge they have of your strengths and weaknesses. And if they believe they can rise faster without you, or by stepping over you, they will take that chance, especially if they believe you won't see it coming. So build alliances, yes, but build them like scaffolding, not like stone. Expect movement, anticipate change, reward loyalty, but never forget it is rented, not owned. And when the time comes, be ready to act first. Better to dissolve a partnership on your terms than to be caught off guard by a silent shift in allegiance. No man is your ally forever. The clock is always ticking. Plan accordingly, and you will never be unprepared when loyalty becomes ambition in disguise. Success is the best alibi for cruelty. In the eyes of the world, success has a remarkable power to rewrite history, reframe actions, and recast intentions. What might be condemned as cruelty in failure is often interpreted as strength, resolve, or visionary leadership when it results in victory. Machiavelli knew that the public judges actions not by their ethics, but by their outcomes. If you win, your methods are justified. If you lose, even mercy is scrutinized. Cruelty, when effective, is rarely remembered for what it truly was. The world does not dwell on the harsh decisions of a conqueror who unified a nation, or the brutal tactics of a general who saved a republic. Instead, it remembers the legacy that followed, the empire built, the peace secured, the prosperity that came after. Victory provides context that softens brutality. It reframes it as necessity, even wisdom. Success makes people forget the cost. It blurs the lines. A decisive ruler who eliminates threats with ruthless precision is not seen as savage, but as bold. A leader who crushes dissent may be called authoritarian, but if the outcome is stability and growth, the narrative shifts. The cruelty becomes background noise to the dominant story of progress. This is the alchemy of power, turning violence into virtue, not by hiding it, but by winning. This principle is dangerous only to those who misunderstand it. Cruelty for its own sake, done without purpose or without follow-through, becomes a stain. But cruelty in the service of order, ambition, or survival, when followed by unmistakable success, becomes forgotten or even admired. The public does not remember the methods of victory so much as the fruits of it. They eat the harvest and forget the blood in the soil. Moreover, cruelty shown in times of uncertainty is often feared. But cruelty that results in stability is seen as leadership. The difference lies not in the act, but in the timing and the result. Punish too soon or too softly, and it seems reckless or insecure. But punish with precision and win decisively, and even your harshest critics will find themselves forced to respect the outcome. They may not like you, but they will not question your effectiveness. Success also gives you the power to write the narrative. You can frame cruelty as duty, as sacrifice, as the burden of leadership. You can claim you did what others lacked the courage to do. You can appeal to the idea that the ends demanded hard choices, and that those choices were made for the greater good. When the public enjoys the benefits of your decisions, they will often silence their own discomfort over how those benefits were achieved. This is the paradox of leadership. To do what is necessary, even when it appears unforgivable. In the moment, knowing that history bends to the will of the victor. Those who win are not judged by the same standards as those who fail. And those who fear being cruel, who avoid difficult decisions out of a desire to be liked, often leave behind chaos and are remembered not for their virtue, but for their weakness. So if cruelty must be used, use it with purpose, use it with clarity, and most importantly, use it to win. Because in the world of power, success does not just erase sins, it turns them into strategy. A leader must know when to become the monster others fear. There comes a time in power when kindness fails, when negotiation reaches its limit, and when rules, if followed blindly, invite collapse. In those moments, a leader must have the clarity and the courage to cross a line most dare not approach, to become the figure others whisper about, the one who doesn't hesitate when hard decisions must be made, the one who can wear the mask of the monster, not because they love cruelty, but because they understand that fear, decisiveness, and calculated ruthlessness are sometimes the only things that preserve order. Machiavelli understood that ruling is not the art of being liked, but of being effective. A leader who tries endlessly to be virtuous, to appease, to compromise at every turn, eventually loses not just authority, but the loyalty of those who once admired them. People follow strength. They may romanticize goodness, but they obey fear. When chaos looms, when enemies circle, when betrayal threatens to split a regime, or a company or a nation in two, it is not compassion that holds things together. It is control. It is the quiet terror that radiates from someone who will do what others won't. Becoming the monster is not about abandoning principles. It is about understanding which principles survive in the real world. Mercy is meaningless when it enables treachery. Diplomacy is dangerous when your enemies exploit it as weakness. A leader must be able to shift, to adapt, to harden when the environment demands it. They must know how to suppress the part of themselves that wants to be seen as noble, in order to protect the structure, the vision, the mission they have sworn to uphold. There will be moments when eliminating a threat requires public severity, when setting an example means sacrificing one of your own, when negotiation must be replaced with command. In these moments, hesitation kills. The leader who flinches loses not only the moment, but the perception of strength that keeps the machine running. A leader who acts quickly, even harshly, can maintain stability. A leader who stalls for applause often ends up destroyed by those who never intended to applaud in the first place. The monster, however, must always be a role, not a descent into madness. Power without restraint becomes tyranny. But power without fear becomes vulnerability. The key is to wield fear as a scalpel, not a sledgehammer, to show people what you can do, not what you do constantly. When used sparingly and with precision, fear becomes a boundary that no one dares to cross. You don't need to roar every day. You only need to roar once, and never let them forget how loud it was. People respect leaders who are willing to protect the house, even when it requires blood on their hands. They may resent the monster, but they sleep under its shadow. And when danger arises, they do not look for the kindest among them. They look for the one strong enough to end the threat. That is the leader who lasts. The one who understands that sometimes, to be the savior, you must first become the feared.